Hey now, it's your boy, PSA Sitch, here with a surprise Friday stream. Oh my gosh, what's going on with everyone's favorite? He's not going to play the harmonica for you today, Adam Friended.
You got to wait for it.
Yeah,
Look,
that's
I'm trying
right.
to make it special. When it happens, it
Mm,
happens.
that's right.
What are
That's
we
right.
talking about today, Sitch? What is
Today, we're going to be
this?
watching some excerpts. It's going to be a short stream, and we're going to be watching some excerpts from the infamous Tim Pool Brianna Wu conversation that happened. Um,
Right.
Now, I'm going to try my best, Adam, and I
Hmm.
want your help to try to remain as calm as possible.
Calm, huh?
Yes, calm is going to be
No,
no,
I
no,
am
no, no.
Mr. Calm. You get to. You are the Jank Uger of the show today. You get to
No, no,
rage.
no, 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 no. Listen, listen. Today, we're going to try to be calm. Going to try to
No,
be a calm
no.
stream.
Come
Okay.
on. Look, we like angry Sitch. Angry Sitch
No,
is
no, no,
more
no, no.
fun.
I got to be calm because listen, I'm going to be honest. Some people are going to get very triggered by this coverage today.
And one of them
Okay.
is you.
And one of them is me.
You
Yes,
are
one of
going to
them is
get
me.
very triggered.
Um, so Phil tweeted about this, and he said that Brianna Wu was insanely bad faith in this conversation.
Right.
Um,
I
and
think
this
I
was
saw
and
that
I
tweet.
I hadn't actually watched it when he tweeted that, so I didn't know what he was referring to. So I watched it, and I just finished watching it, a few days ago, and I know exactly what he was talking about. And essentially, basically, what happens is she'll bring up a critique or criticism of Tim, and then Tim will, he does the news every day, so he is far more has a lot more facts, I should say, or a lot more fact claims, I should say, at his fingertips to kind of throw at her that she is completely unfamiliar with. And instead of engaging the conversation in good faith to say, like, well, if what you're saying is true, this is how I feel, let's look up what you're saying, blah, 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 blah. She does a lot of this, like, make a claim. Tim kind of debunks her claim, or at least counters it, and then she just tries to move on, and it looks really bad for her, because and you'll see as we're watching this, because Tim says a lot of things that I don't think are true,
Okay.
and I think
Well, hold
he's
on a second. That's a big claim. What concerning what specifically?
well concerning the charges against Trump and concerning the charges against Biden.
Okay.
Um, in terms of now, I'm not saying he's lying. I don't think he knows that they're not true. I think he's just misreporting things that he's read other people say, and he's assuming that other people are saying things that are true.
Right.
Like there's
And
a
they're
part in this video where he literally reads an article that the article is just falsely is just completely false. But I'm assuming Tim doesn't know that the article is completely false.
okay. So
But
you've dived in and done some fact checking on some of the claims made
yes,
here, and you feel that they're untrue.
yes,
But
yes.
Tim, obviously, we're not accusing Tim Pool of lying. We're
Yeah,
saying,
I don't think he's like
yeah,
intentionally lying or anything.
misreporting because there are other people in the news misreporting. Like we see
Right.
that all the time. This
Yes,
is like,
yes.
this is why we're super cautious about making claims without
Right.
digging into original sources or backing them up through multiple sources.
Yeah. And it really shows the weakness of Brianna's strategy in this conversation, which was basically to go on Tim's show and kind of hit him with all the, you're a right winger, bad Tim Pool bad narrative, as opposed to just listening to what he was saying and then actually engage and question it. Because if she was sitting there and listening to what he was saying and questioning it, she might have actually got to the bottom of some of the things on air with Tim in the conversation and been able to actually say, well, is this actually accurate? Is the way that you're talking about this actually accurate? But she didn't, because she was too afraid to actually dive into anything. Because if she did that and turned out that she was wrong, she would have to admit something or take a position on something she didn't want to take.
Yeah. So she's basically at a disadvantage here. She can't really dig in because she's like, I might hit an uncomfortable truth
Right. It's kind of like when you're a lawyer and they say never ask a question of a
that
witness
you
you don't know
don't
the
know the
answer to.
answer to. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because they might say something and then you go, ah. And so, yeah, so no, so Brianna did very poorly in the conversation. She definitely, I don't think was acting in I wouldn't say the best faith in terms of the conversation, which you'll see. I'm gonna try to be calm. Yesterday, it was funny. I actually had a conversation with my parents about politics, as I often do. and I kind of blew up on them.
Did you really?
Yes.
On your folks?
Yes.
Sitch.
I don't usually do
Why?
that. Okay, so well, no, okay. So I have listen, I have a lot of heated political conversations with family members, but we were talking about the New Mexico governor who did the ridiculous executive order to try to ban guns
Right. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
being in public for a month. And they were trying to do this kind of like wishy-washy liberal BS about like, well, it's not so bad, or maybe it's a good thing or something. Um, And as we were kind of into conversation, and I was like, well, people have a right to defend themselves. I don't want to be walking around the street and someone tells me I can't have a gun if someone tries to attack me or rob me or whatever. And they were giving me it was like just the greatest hits of all like the left-wing nonsense about guns, where I was like, well, you're more likely that if you have a gun that's going to be used against you. And I'm like, well,
That
okay, you
old
don't act,
Jim.
yeah. And I'm like, well, you don't know that. You've heard that, but you don't actually know that, right? You've never read it. You never looked into a study to see if that's, true. And then the whole like, well, what you think it's okay for people to be walking around in public, Sitch, and like they're gonna get into an argument and then they're gonna start pulling guns on each other and then shoot innocent people. And I'm like, how often does that happen compared to just like someone being robbed or being assaulted by a
Right.
criminal? Like, come on. And so I kind of blew up with them, and I literally said like, this is liberal cuck shit.
No way.
To my parents. I'm like,
Why?
it was just so enraging to me. I was like, listen, people have a right to defend themselves. Like, I just don't care about everything you're saying is nonsense. People have a right to defend themselves. And to me, it's despicable to say a person does not have the right to walk around armed in case someone tries to accost them. I just can't stand that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are risks, and obviously they're pointing out the risks, but at some point you're like, I will take those risks just to be in a position where if something goes down, I'm prepared.
Yeah, that's exactly because it's like it's just if part of the reason I think I get really mad about it too is because it feels to me it's like it's such an obvious thing, and I don't
Yeah.
feel like the opinion that I was hearing from them and from other people that are Democrats are real opinions. They feel like tribal opinions,
Of
you
course,
know.
yeah. And
And
they
I've
are just repeating the greatest hits.
right because it's like and they know this. I've had this conversation with them, and I said to them then, I'm like, listen, you guys know I'm like in favor of pretty strict gun control and stuff. We've had this long conversations about this on the stream, and everyone, gets all triggered about, what I want to do for gun control. But there's a big difference between saying like, yeah, we should have gun control to try to keep hands out of the guns out of the hands of criminals, and just saying law-abiding citizens can't have guns. It's just to me, so there's such a wild disconnect between those two positions. And it's just like I don't know, it just drives me crazy. People should have the right to defend themselves, Adam, or at least attempt to defend themselves.
Of
I just
course
don't
they
understand how you could
should.
take that away from them.
Well, they don't see the value in that because a lot of liberals have this Pollyanna view that it's not going to happen to them. They're never going to be in
Yes.
that situation. The chances of
Yes.
that happening to them are so slim that they're safer just being without a gun.
You're right.
And
You're
I
right.
mean that it might be the case that it's in a slim situation, obviously, but a lot of my problems are they want to put these regulations in place that hurt people who are in places where the chances of them being accosted are not very slim. Like they live in a bad neighborhood or are
Hmm.
getting regularly harassed by
Right.
people. Yeah, those people need protection. So that's great if you're living in your suburban gated community. You're like, oh, we don't need any guns in here. Yeah, you got a guy with a gun at the guard station. It's like,
Right.
of
Exactly. Well,
course.
and I
Yeah.
and I think, and I should have said this instead of like blowing up on them, but but whatever. Um, I think what's going on is that you don't they don't hear on the news. You don't hear on the news all the times that a person was robbed or beaten up or assaulted. Number one, you don't hear
Well,
about all the times someone was robbed, beaten up, and assaulted and used a gun to protect themselves. Number
you
two,
don't hear when the gun stopped the assault, when the
right,
assailant ran away. Yeah.
right. But you know what you do hear about? You hear about all these stories. The media always fixates on road rage stories where someone gets shot. They always fixate on these, someone drove up to someone's driveway and the person shot them through the window. Like all these like weird times that like a person uses a gun improperly to kill someone. The media will hyperfixate on that. And they hear all those stories. So So they get into this kind of fallacy of like, well, if I'm hearing it from the news, that must mean that that's what's actually happening the majority of the time, as opposed
Right.
to all of the common day assaults, crime, burgles, blah, blah, thefts that happen every day.
Yeah. Do they even talk about gun control in this Timcast thing?
No, I was just because I'm going to try to be calm. I was not
Okay.
calm yesterday. So,
Like a big sidetrack for a short
yes,
stream, Sitch.
it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Listen, it'll give some charity because I'm going to complain about Tim. So,
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
there you
that's a
go.
good thing. Look, we all are in. Look, your guns are safe with us. No gun grabbers on this stream.
Right.
Now
Okay.
let's talk about all the things Tim will cover.
Right. So I'm
Look,
going to just try to.
if anyone needs a gun, it's Tim Pool. Correct?
True.
I mean, everyone's out to
true.
get that guy.
Right.
If you're in Tim Pool's situation, you don't want anyone taking away your guns. You got like a million crazy people at you at all times.
Of course. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So they start into it, and I believe, according to my time codes, they're going to kind of start to get into some of the indictment claims regarding the Georgia Trump indictment.
So we're going to be talking about Georgia Trump indictment. What is, just so we can know going into this, let's give the background of that. Just a brief, this is the case where the phone call took place. Trump called up the Secretary of State, I believe it is, in charge of the votes, and said a thing that we're hearing on the media all the time now about how he said, find me the votes. Just in charity to Trump, something that you can never do nowadays without being misconstrued into being a Trump apologist, which really sucks because like there is a thing called the truth.
Right.
Trump in the beginning of that phone call lays out a bunch of different places where he sees vote discrepancies in the election, and his thesis is that some of those votes were counted incorrectly, and those votes are actually my votes, right? Or they're votes for Biden that should be thrown out because they have like signature discrepancies and stuff like that. It's been a while since I listened to that phone call, so I don't necessarily think that case will gain any kind of traction because he was asking them to forge votes. I don't think that's the claim, even though that's the claim most of the media makes out of it. So, but there's other components to it.
There's other components, right?
Yeah.
So the phone call is one component of it, and it's actually a fairly minor component of the case.
Yes.
That's what got all the publicity was the phone call, because it's this audio thing in here. And I agree with you. I don't like to focus on these pieces of evidence that are presented in cases that are highly subjective.
Right.
Because then people just kind of argue about interpretations about, whether Trump was using mafia talk or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I don't even care about the phone call.
There was some mafia talk. Look, there was definitely some mafia talk on that call. He does go into well, he goes into, you're in a big trouble if you get this wrong.
Right.
This is a terrible thing. There's a lot of legal liability here. Like he's saying things like that.
Sure, but I'm just saying, like, for my purposes, I like to try to focus on things that are not up to the subjective mind to interpret. It's just something is objectively correct or incorrect.
I agree. Yes.
So the bigger part of the Georgia case is not even about the phone call. It's about the fake electors.
Okay.
And I think, and I have to kind of explain how this works because most people don't know how it works. And if you don't understand how it works, you don't really understand what's going on here. So essentially, when you go and you vote for president in America,
right?
The way it works is that, everyone in the state votes. And at the end of it, the state tallies up the votes and it says, okay, in the state of Georgia, we've determined that Joe Biden won the majority of votes in the state of Georgia. So therefore, that means is that Georgia, the state of Georgia, will then turn around and vote for Biden to be president. And the way that actually works physically or logistically is that before the general election happens, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they both select a group of people, and these group of people are called the electors. And if their candidate wins, if Biden wins, then the state of Georgia will certify that the Democratic electors get to represent the state of Georgia and vote for president.
Very clear.
And if Trump wins the state of Georgia, then the state of Georgia will certify that the Trump Republican Party slate of electors will get to vote for Trump to be president. Because remember, we have an electoral college, okay? So the popular vote doesn't really matter. What matters is whoever wins the vote in the state then awards the state's votes to this slate of electors. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm kind of explaining this not the best way.
And those electors are literally the voters in the electoral college.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Right. So like if I don't know off the top of my head, like if Georgia has 15 electoral votes or whatever, it's a combination of their House of Representatives and their Senate vote. And their Senate is the number. And that's who actually votes for president. So when you go to vote in your election for president, you're not actually voting for president. You're voting for which party is going to get to turn around and vote for their candidate, essentially.
Right. I think it's 270. Yeah. A majority of 270 electoral votes is required to be elected president. So each of these electors are going to be the people that convene in the electoral college. And wasn't January 6th the day that they were supposed to be counting the electors?
January 6th is the day that Congress is supposed to.
The electors come in and they.
Well, no, they've already voted at that point.
Okay.
January 6th is when the Congress counts the
electors. Okay, I got you.
They've already voted, right?
I got you.
Okay. So, but this is important because this is important to understand what was going on here. So at first, Trump sent Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and some other people to go to state legislatures and try to convince state legislatures that they should throw out all the votes for their state and just have the state legislature just vote that Donald Trump is president.
Right.
That was the first part of the plan, which is we found a lot of fraud, or we think there's a lot of fraud. So you should just throw everyone's vote away and just vote for Trump for president. And if you remember, if you watch our January 6th coverage, the guy, I think it was from Arizona, who is a Republican who wanted Trump to win, was like, well, Rudy, for me to do this, you got to give me evidence. And then Rudy's response is, well, we have a lot of theories. We don't have a lot of evidence.
I do remember that. It was kind of hilarious.
Yes. So none of the state legislatures, even the Republican-controlled ones, none of them decided to do this, throw out everyone's vote and just vote for Trump. They all decided against doing that. So then part two of the kind of plan where the quote fake electors came in was that the idea here was that even though the state of Georgia and these other states determined that Joe Biden won the state, and the governor and the state legislature of Georgia determined that Joe Biden won the state, which meant that the state of Georgia said, okay, you Democrats and your slate of electors, you are officially certified and granted the power of the state to vote for the state to vote for Joe Biden, right? It's an official legal thing that happens. Right. So they grant this power to the Democratic slate. The Democratic slate casts their votes for Biden. So the Trump campaign essentially goes to the Republican electors who don't have any power whatsoever granted them by the state. And they say, hey, even though you don't have the power to, we want you to sign these pieces of paper claiming you have the power to vote for the state and we're going to make it look official and make it look exactly like the actual official slate of electors that's saying that you're voting for Trump on behalf of the state of Georgia.
And we're going to give you a Democratic elector that you have to take out.
No.
Before.
Right. So the Trump electors in all these states agreed to do this, and the reason they wanted this was because they wanted them to take that slate, these like fake slates that have not actually been certified by any state, and they wanted to go to Mike Pence on January 6th, and they wanted to hand Mike Pence these fake / alternative electors, and Mike Pence was supposed to look at them, and he was supposed to say, I can't decide which of these is real.
Wow.
Which is the real one, the one that everyone knows because it was widely reported on that the candidate won the state, or this other one from the Trump campaign. I can't tell which one of this is real. Well, since I can't make this determination which is real, I'm going to have to defer the election to the House of Representatives in Congress.
This is
And-
so insidious. Sitch.
And wouldn't you know it, the House of Representatives is, a majority Republican. Oh, they're going to vote Donald Trump to be president. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Right.
Okay. So this was the plan. Now, obviously, this didn't work because Mike Pence had the whole thing where he said he didn't have the authority or ability to, choose the slate of electors or do this or any of this stuff. He believed that his role was entirely ceremonial, blah, 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 blah. So none of that actually happened. But that was the plan. Okay. So the Georgia charges against Trump is mostly about doing this, is about creating these documents where these people signed off to say that they were representing the state of Georgia when obviously they had no legal authority to make that claim.
So this is kind of a fraud case that they're making.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. One more thing. Stop talking to us about faithless electors. Okay. Because faithless electors are something completely different. Faithless electors are when a particular elector decides they don't like who they're supposed to vote for and they vote for the other candidate instead, which is a completely different situation.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, which first of all, most states, not all, but most states have laws preventing that from occurring.
Right.
And it was actually funny because when Trump won the first time in 2016, there were a lot of Democrats going around trying to convince the Republican electors to become faithless electors and to not vote for Donald Trump. Though obviously that didn't go anywhere. So, but yeah, faithless electors has literally nothing to do with this case. If some pundit out there is telling you that, they don't know what they're talking about. So
yeah, the evidently there's not. Well, some states have closed the loophole, but for a long time the elector could just vote for whoever they wanted to. They weren't legally bound to vote for whoever the state tells them to vote for. Right. And you did have people that would vote. They would basically, occasionally they would say, look, I can't vote for this person based on my conscience, so I'm overriding the entire will of the American people.
Right.
That argument lost steam after a while. So.
If the Trump campaign went to the Democratic electors and tried to convince them to vote for Trump instead, that would be legal, assuming that they could be faithless electors in
certain states. Yeah,
right. That's very different than saying we're going to have our other electors sign pieces of paper saying that they're the rightful electors of the state when they're not, and that hasn't been certified by the governor at all. That's just made up, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, because if you look at the charges are things like false statements in writing, solicitation of violation of oath by public official or public officer, impersonating a public officer, conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, forgery. So these are the charges that are being hit with in the Georgia case. Right.
And I mean, some of these poor people, though, I think were totally duped. Like they didn't realize what they were doing was completely illegal. It seems. I mean,
a lot of the electors who did this thought, because they were told by like Giuliani, essentially, that, oh, don't worry, we're only going to use this in the off chance that a court rules in Trump's favor, and then your actual slate will become the official slate. That was what they were told, a lot of these electors.
Right.
And some of the electors in some of the state, in two of the states, there's 7 states, 2 of the states, the electors were smart enough to actually make sure that the slate said on the piece of paper somewhere, this will only be valid if Trump wins like a court case or something. The other ones didn't do that. So there's a strong argument to be made that the electors themselves shouldn't be charged for doing this. They were kind of duped into it. And, I'm sympathetic to that to some extent.
Yeah, so am I, definitely.
So, okay.
This way, why are you out here? Because I watched
oh, sorry. My sound was off.
Multiple clips of you before this show, and you're talking about how like the prosecutions against Trump by the Department of Justice in multiple states, like what's her name, Franny
Willis,
talking about her in Georgia, how as if she is out here doing something that's underhanded or wrong, was just Trump meeting the fate.
Why was Jenna Ellis indicted?
Why was she indicted?
Yeah.
For an election, well, allegedly because of this election conspiracy.
What are the specific counts she was indicted on?
I can't speak to Jenna Ellis,
and that's a serious issue. So the issue with Fani Willis is that she indicted lawyers who did nothing. She indicted members of the Trump administration who did nothing.
How do you know that?
I read the indictment. Jenna Ellis is charged on counts 1 and 2 simply being part of a criminal conspiracy and solicitation to a public official to violate their oath of office. Why? Because she provided legal counsel to Trump. That's it. She's not charged on there's 30 some odd counts, 1 and 2 only for Jenna Ellis. And the question is, if you go to a lawyer and you say, what should I do here? And they provide you legal advice, to say that's a conspiracy is insane. More importantly, one of the Republicans indicted in Georgia, he was indicted because he was working with what's called an alternate slate of electors.
Okay, so before we even get into this, this is where it would be like if you were engaged in the conversation in a more good faith way. You were to say, you know what, I agree with you, Tim. If Donald Trump went to a lawyer and just asked and said like legal advice and saying, is it legal to do X, Y, Z, right? And the lawyer says, in good faith, says either that they think or they don't think that whatever the action is legal, then the lawyer shouldn't be charged for that, right? I don't think most people should agree with that.
Right, obviously, yeah.
Right.
They're just giving their expert opinion on a legal matter.
Right. And that's where if you're having the conversation in good faith, you'd say, okay, I agree with you. If what you're saying is true, the way you're characterizing is true, I would agree with you. However, I have literally no clue at all where Tim got this information from, because this is flatly not accurate. This is completely inaccurate.
Right.
If you look at the indictment, Jenna Ellis is not indicted for giving Donald Trump legal advice at all. Okay.
Right.
She's indicted for personally, her and Rudy Giuliani personally went to state legislatures and called state legislatures and tried to convince them to A, throw out the vote, and B, then went and talked to these electors and told them and got them to do, to create the fake electors and to sign off on these fake electors. And Jenna Ellis was personally involved in doing this action, convincing people to do this. And that's why she's being charged. So I don't understand.
That's not legal advice.
Yeah, so I don't understand.
That's enacting a legal strategy.
Exactly. So I literally don't understand. And this is in the indictment. You could just pull up the indictment and you can look through the charges, the counts that she's being charged for. It says, it gives a summary of what they're accusing her. Now you can say, well, maybe she didn't do those things, and that's fine, I guess. But this is what she's being charged with, doing these things.
Right.
Right. And so
do we know if she has done those things, or is they're just allegations at this point?
Well, okay. So for some of the things, they have evidence because apparently her and Rudy Giuliani left voicemails on certain people's phones, talking to them about doing these things.
No.
Now we haven't heard those voicemails, so we just, it could turn out that the indicting document is, BS, or the charging document is BS, right? But that's just what they're claiming.
Look, you don't leave a voicemail if you don't think what you're doing is perfectly legal, though. So,
you would hope.
Yeah.
You would hope. But yes, it says Jenna Ellis solicited, requested, and importuned the Pennsylvania legislatures present at the meeting to unlawfully appoint presidential electors from Pennsylvania for Donald J. Trump. Okay. That's one of the counts. Another count, Jenna Ellis appeared, spoke, and presented witnesses, and invited a group of Pennsylvania legislators and others to meet with him at the White House later that day and then they talk about to do the electors thing.
Right.
And so they kind of, and if you just go through it, Jenna Ellis placed a telephone call to the Speaker of Pennsylvania, left a voicemail for the purposes of requesting him to unlawfully appoint presidential electors from Pennsylvania, blah, 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 blah. And they kind of go through they hit them for different charges for Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, for all the different things.
Right.
So again, maybe she didn't do this. Maybe she'll be found innocent of doing this. Or maybe you can even make an argument that this is a legal thing to do. And that's all fine. You can make all those arguments and we'll find out in court. But to say that she was just charged with giving legal advice to Trump is completely not true. And I have no idea why Tim thinks that's what she got charged with.
Right. Is there a process in place? Well, I guess there was no apparatus to question the legal status of the election. Like, the legal status of the election was not in flux when this happened. They were kind of trying to create the illusion that the election was still in flux, correct?
Well, so when they were doing this, when they were making these calls and talking to these people. I mean, there still were court cases going on at the time where
Okay.
Trump was trying to fight in these states to make determinations about whether, you know, votes were illegal or whether it's fraud or blah, 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 blah. So it is
Right.
still in flux when this is happening.
So
When-
that would be how I would think they would justify what they were doing as being legal.
Right. But where they get into problems is that, so once there's this thing called the safe harbor deadline, which is in December, and it's supposed to be like whatever the state certifies at that point is like it. There's
It's
no,
over.
there's
Right.
over, right? And that happens in December. And where I think Trump and the Trump team has difficulties legally is like if all they did was just try to create or have these people do the fake electors thing, and their only argument was, we are only creating these on the off chance that we win a legal case so that we'll, like, if it's close to the safe harbor deadline, we'll have them ready to go because these things happen very quickly and we don't want to miss our window of opportunity. And so as soon as we win a case, we'll be like, boom, here are the documents and we're sending them to Washington, or we're sending them to the state legislature to sign off and then sending them to Washington. If that's all they were doing, I think they would have a strong case to defend themselves, because you'd say, well, you know, technically it's sort of forgery because you made the documents before you really had the authority to do it, but you didn't really like try to do anything with them, you know, essentially, right? You just kind of created them on the off chance you were going to use them. But then where they get into the problem is after they made those documents, they did try to hand them to Mike Pence and did try to get Mike Pence to use them to change the outcome of the election.
God, no.
And that's where they get, see, to me, that's where all the problem kind of arises from.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Oh my. So they cooked them up before the safe harbor date, but then they actually tried to use them.
Yeah. It was either Ron Johnson or some assistant of Ron Johnson. Like literally, there's like a picture of him handing Pence, trying to hand Pence some of these like fake electors. So.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah. So.
Which this country has always had, particularly 1961. 1961.
You're talking about the thing to go up to Mike Pence with the list of fake electors? You think that's a legit tactic?
No, I'm saying that a guy, a Republican, went to a group of Republicans who are running an election to be electors. He told the press, this group exists in the event we win a lawsuit. For example, are you familiar with the election of 1960?
So this is kind of the problem too, because that was the original plan. The original plan was, we'll create these electors in case we win the lawsuit. And then they lost lawsuits and they said,
well,
you know,
let's
we
just
have
use
these
them
electors.
anyway.
We should use them anyway. So that's the issue.
Wow.
I'm not, man.
So this is a big problem. Okay. So if you sit here and say Fani Willis didn't do anything wrong, or is
she holding a Majority Report mug?
I'm assuming it's a Timcast mug, isn't it?
It looks like it's a Majority Report mug, like she brought it
For
herself.
example, are you familiar with the election of 1960?
Oh my God, you're right. Why did she do that? Oh, that's so gross. Oh my God, Brianna, what the hell?
I didn't catch that, but
that's so awful.
Well, she did a little product placement.
That's really messed up, because like she knows that Tim has this big problem with Sam Cedar.
I know.
That's so messed up.
Yeah.
I'm glad you caught. I never caught that. That's so bad.
It's like bringing in a mug with your ex-girlfriend's face on it and being like, oh, look, I'm just here for my interview.
That's really bad. Come on. What's up? That's gross. You know, she does, and we're not going to watch it because this whole conversation is 3.5 hours long. But she does a lot of like simping and defending of Sam Cedar in this conversation, which is pretty wacky. But
yeah, it is. It is. So,
and also I feel really bad because if you look at the title of this, it's supposed to be From Gamergate to Civil War with Brianna Wu and Alex Baldwin. And Alex Baldwin is someone who ran Kotaku in Action, which was the big Gamergate subreddit. And apparently over the years, him and Brianna have become friendly and they've kind of buried the hatchet and all this stuff. And they were supposed to talk about Gamergate and sort of the beginning of the culture war, I imagine, and how it's got to where it is today. And they never talk about that at all.
Right.
So this is a 3.5 hour conversation. And I think Alex Baldwin says literally like one sentence, and they never talk about Gamergate. They never talk about anything related to anything that I assume he knows about. And it's just Brianna and Tim going back and forth on like these current event issues. And it's just like, if that's what she wanted, that's fine. But she should have just said that and saved this guy like a plane strip out
Yeah,
the,
no,
the
that's
temple's
the thing.
compound.
That's the thing. Who knows how many states away he flew from to be there?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Not man.
And so this is a big problem. So if you sit here and say Fani Willis didn't do anything wrong, where it's absurd, but you don't understand the historical context of what an alternate elector is and how they operate. Knowing the election of 1960, I'll tell you exactly what happened. Hawaii went Republican. It was certified Republican. The Democrats convened an alternate slate of, as you described, fake electors and delivered the fake electors to the electoral vote count. Richard Nixon, as vice president, said, I am not going to count the certified vote. I'm going to choose the Democrat vote. Does anyone oppose? They did not, and it was chosen. Now, you can argue that shouldn't be done. You can argue that the Republicans should not have done it. But it's not a crime to say that the process of the Constitution requires.
Okay. So my understanding is that he's kind of missing some key facts here in how he's talking about this. Well, first of all, you would say that just because someone did something illegal 60 years ago doesn't necessarily justify you doing it nowadays, obviously. Right?
Of course. Yeah.
But so he's missing some kind of key facts here, which is that there
It didn't
was
change the outcome of the election, I'm guessing.
well, number
is-
one, yes, obviously it did not
Okay.
change the outcome of the election, obviously. But so the reason that the Democrats did this, which by the way, I don't think they should have, but the reason that they did this was because in Hawaii they were doing a recount. And they were doing it for the same reason that Trump campaign originally said they were doing it. They were doing this recount, and it was going to come very close to the deadline. And they wanted to have these things basically ready to go in case they won the recount. Because so the way this works,
And they
it's kind
did
of-
win the recount.
yes, the way this works.
Oh,
and
man.
this came up in the Gore-Bush conversation. This is actually why Bush won the state of Florida, was because even if the state does the recount and they find out that the other candidate won, but they find out after the safe harbor deadline, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. If it's too late, it doesn't matter. And that's what happened with the Bush Gore thing, was that they literally didn't have enough time, or the court ruled they didn't have enough time to do a full statewide recount before the deadline. And so that's why they do this thing where they're like, okay, well, maybe we want to have these electors like ready to go, like the instant, just in case, the recount like finishes at like 11 o'clock the night before, and we'll be right there ready.
Yeah.
So
makes perfect
okay.
sense. But
right.
this,
so
this situation in Hawaii, obviously, it didn't change the outcome of the election. They probably did the recount, and the recount came out in their favor, and they just did it to look good. They wanted to enact the will of the people.
right. And so my understanding is that when so basically what happened was that they did the recount. They actually finished the recount though before the safe harbor deadline, and it did show that JFK won Hawaii by a tiny, slim margin. And so Hawaii did officially certify the Democrats to be the representatives of Hawaii. And that the Democrats actually did there. So when Nixon was standing, because he was actually the vice president presiding over, it's kind of very similar to the Pence situation. Nixon was the vice president presiding over the Senate or over Congress, doing the tally for his own election, because it was him versus JFK. And for some reason, I don't know why, though, he got this. When he got the slate from Hawaii, he got the original Republican slate, which was wrong, actually, because it was certified before the recount even finished. So you could say that wasn't even should never have been certified. And then he had the slate of electors from the Democrats who created at the same time, which was also not certified from the state. And then he had a third slate, which was actually after the recount from the Democrats certified by the state.
Right.
And he chose that one. My understanding is that he chose that one, which obviously would make sense.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are very important key facts, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
There be electors in the event a lawsuit is won in court.
Okay.
That's in fact the only way it could be
so
done.
Multiple things here. The first thing is, Trump is facing, I don't
94.
care about Jenna Ellis as much as I care about Trump, right? There are multiple indictments in multiple states. Trump is the person I care about. And I think it's worth saying, like, we haven't had a chance to really talk about Ukraine policy yet, but, like.
When she says, like, I don't care about Jenna Ellis, I just care about Trump, it makes it sound so obviously politically motivated. because you're like, oh, as long as they get Trump, that's all I care about.
It does. It also seems very callous.
Yes, yes. Because Tim's point, and the reason he's bringing up Jenna Ellis is he's trying to make a point to say that he thinks that the prosecutions, or at least some elements of the prosecutions, are not valid. Which, if that's true, I mean, that should be addressed. I don't think you should just hand wave it away.
Right.
And if she'd actually,
they wrongly indicted this person that she doesn't care about, Sitch. So
right.
Who cares?
Yeah, but if she had actually challenged that to say, well, is that true? If she had said, listen, what you're saying, if that's true, I agree with you. That sounds awful. Is that true? Let's bring up the indictment and look at it. And if they had brought up the indictment right there live and looked at it, they would find out that it wasn't accurate.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why you should try to like engage with the person you're talking to in these conversations. I know it's difficult because you're live, you're in front of, it's on Tim's audience, he's in front of like tens of thousands of people and stuff, and you don't exactly know where the answer is going to go, but you should just try to be in a headspace of having an honest conversation.
Yeah, one of the advantages we have is we don't really care where the evidence leads. We're not worried about the uncomfortable truth that might come out on the show.
Right, because like with a lot of this stuff, with the election stuff, or even with the Burisma stuff, if Joe Biden is found guilty of this and gets impeached, I don't really care.
Yeah,
like,
I don't either.
Whatever. It doesn't. I'm not going to have lose sleep over it.
Like when Donald Trump went in, like January 6th happened, like this was like just roll the credits for Vladimir Putin on like seeing the United States destroy itself. Like this was his wildest
absolutely.
dream. Well, you had
China
Jackson Hinkle on here to just put forward pro-Kremlin propaganda. Coming back to this was a tremendously dark day for the United States. I do think Donald Trump played a role. It's not like there's no evidence. Anyone out there can listen to him like saying that clip. I just need you to go find me X number of votes. That phone call of Brad Ratz.
I'm gonna pause real quick,
please.
I think we're running into an issue that is common of people who come on this show, and it's that I don't think you actually read the stuff.
Did I sit down, read every single indictment for the 5
Not the
states?
indictment.
Yeah.
Did you read the conversation between Raffensperger and Trump that led to the I just need you to find the votes?
So this conversation, this is why this conversation is annoying to me. So it's like Tim, he makes, so this is how this entire conversation goes. Brianna makes a claim about something. Tim says, yes, but here's this other information. Brianna doesn't know what he's talking about
because she doesn't have the other information.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, Tim's doing like this new stuff every day, even though, as I said, he's completely wrong about the Jenna Ellis thing. So I have no clue where he derived that from.
He's wrong there, but he's right here. Look, all she knows is the soundbite that she's been fed 1 million times about Trump saying, find the votes, which is, I mean, that's not a solid claim in this case.
I agree completely. Yeah. And I agree. He's right about this. And also the phone call is a lot more subjective of however you want to interpret it.
Yeah.
But this is the pattern. She brings up a claim. He brings up something. She doesn't know about it. So then she changes the subject to something else.
Right. Because she can't speak credibly on any of the topics.
Right. And then like literally that pattern just repeats for 3.5 hours.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of people, when you look through the comments of this video, are like incredibly frustrated with the conversation, frustrated with her and all this stuff, because it doesn't feel like, it feels more like, she came to the show with a narrative that she wants to push. And if she can't push that narrative, she's going to keep changing the subject to try to find a way to push the narrative, essentially. She's going to keep probing like all these different topics to try to find some weakness that she can kind of thread her needle into to try to, quote, expose Tim or to show Tim is wrong about something, but she doesn't know enough about any of the subjects to do that.
Yeah, she says in here that she watched a bunch of Tim Pool's shows.
Right.
But I don't think she watched them. Well, she watched them for things that she thought he got incorrect because she has the mainstream media narrative, but she really doesn't know enough about the topic to know how she could credibly claim that he was wrong. Yeah.
Right.
Even on this, like I would don't find the votes thing. This is why I brought it up, because it's pointless to bring it up. There's just so much evidence against that claim. when we're talking about the elector stuff, okay, now we're in some shady territory here.
Yeah, and to just and she says this several times, and she said this in other conversations, to just say kind of like, and I say this with respect, Brianna, if you're listening, if you're trying to be persuasive to an audience that's not your audience, just saying it's a conspiracy theory. I read something in the New York Times, the Washington Post that said something that you think is more credible. That's not persuasive to anyone in Tim Pool's audience at all. In fact, it's the opposite. They say, oh, well, if you read in the New York Times, the Washington Post, then it's probably BS.
Another thing that's massively unpersuasive is dismissing sources out of hand. And I mean, I don't care if it's someone's blog, like just flatly dismissing sources. I mean, it could be correct. It could be incorrect. Like the New York Times has been wrong about stuff, and some guy's blog has been right about stuff.
Sure. No, I agree with you in theory, but in practice, people in the audience will only care if you're dismissing. If you're dismissing a source they agree with you is BS, then they're totally fine with you doing that. They think that's hyper credible. It's only if you dismiss something that they agree with, or you don't dismiss something they don't agree with.
Well, I'm just saying it looks bad optically to just dismiss a source out of hand, even if that source, that source, they could be, look, I've seen people who will dismiss the New York Times out of hand, right?
Right.
Until they report something that they want to believe. Then all of a sudden, this is the New York Times. What are you talking about? So,
of course.
Yeah. Well, I think you should always address the claim at hand. And I know she does this a couple times. She's like, oh, well, that source is not credible, so let's move on.
Right. And we're gonna watch a clip where she does that. But like, I think what is credible, I agree with you completely. I think what's more credible is you said, if the New York Times said something, say, well, let's look at the article. And if the New York Times says, an anonymous source told us, right? Then I'm like, well, okay, listen, I'm not going to believe some anonymous source that the New York Times just claimed. And I think that's totally fair for anyone in any situation to just say, I'm going to need more than an anonymous source to really buy into any of this stuff.
Yeah. I'm talking in terms of like a publication or a person.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I totally agree with you. This anonymous source stuff has to end.
Right.
Listen to that entire clip multiple
So what
times.
was the full context is not as you described it.
The full context? Are you kidding me, man? Come on. He was obviously trying to do a mob push on
the full context.
Come on, man.
Is that the Joe Biden aphorism?
Are you kidding me? Come on, man. It's just not a good way to argue. It really isn't.
Is we found double counted votes in, I think it was.
And then that, Tim, so condescending.
I know.
It's so condescending.
I know why Phil was like losing his mind when he was watching this. Yeah.
I just look. Optics matter. Optics totally matter.
Was Fulton. Those were removed.
Oh,
right?
Tim.
Saying "oh, Tim" isn't a response to the point I'm making. Do you have a response?
I don't think that's a credible argument.
So I'll do
that. I mean, Tim makes it. Tim has good persuasion to point it out exactly and to call it out. So
totally,
it kind of reminds me of when I forget his name, when that guy argued against was it Glenn Lowry? Not Glenn, John McWhorter in the remember the debate that we watched.
I remember many debates we've watched.
There was like the white journalist, and he was debating John McWhorter. It was the same debate. People was like the Jordan Peterson,
right. Intelligence Squared, or
yeah. And he kept doing this thing where he was just like, it was Matt Taibbi, right? It was Matt Taibbi and John McWhorter,
there you
remember?
go.
Yeah.
That was actually Malcolm Gladwell, though.
Malcolm Gladwell. That was his name.
It would help if you got the right guy.
Why couldn't? No. I thought it was John McWhorter and Matt Taibbi versus Malcolm Gladwell and what's her face, the lady, the same lady that was in the.
You said John McWhorter, so that's.
I thought John McWhorter was in that debate.
No. John McWhorter.
Who was on Matt Taibbi's side?
Malcolm, not Glad. Why
do I think of John McWhorter?
Yeah, it's another Malcolm, but I can't remember who it is.
Oh, it was Douglas Murray. It was Matt Taibbi and Douglas Murray. I don't know why I thought John McWhorter was in there. Douglas Murray and Matt Taibbi versus Malcolm Gladwell and Michelle Goldberg. And Malcolm Gladwell kept doing all this like kind of like dismissive hand waving stuff. And everyone in the audience, not everyone, but like 10% of the audience turned against him. It was like the biggest turn in the audience voting because they take the polling like before the people discussed it and after. And before the people discussed it, more people were on Michelle Goldberg and Malcolm Gladwell's side, and afterwards, less, like significantly less people were.
Yeah, you walk into Tim Pool's show, you have zero credibility. You're basically trying to build your credibility here. But that smug dismissiveness of everything he says is not a credibility building move.
Right.
You come off as egotistical. You come off as elitist.
Right. Yeah.
Do this. You are completely 100% correct, and I will see that argument to you.
Sure.
Now let's pause, and we'll talk about Jenna Ellis and why I think saying I don't care about that is part of the problem.
Well, hold on. My statement is my focus is not Jenna Ellis.
Right.
It's Trump.
And so when we talk about, say, like the corruption in our our justice system, I don't say, for the most part, you know, look at this charge against Donald Trump for this specific thing he did. In fact, I say Jenna Ellis almost every single time. Don't get me wrong. I think the charges against Trump are laughable and they're egregious. But the real crux of the issue is they're going after his lawyers. Mm-hmm. And you can argue about Giuliani because Giuliani was deeply involved in a lot. And
this is why I really don't know where he got this idea about Jenna Ellis from. Because if you read the indictment, she was like right along with Giuliani doing half of the stuff he was doing. She was literally she's charged with, maybe she didn't do it, but she's being charged with personally interacting with, calling and talking to these people and trying to get them to be involved with this elector scheme. So I have no clue where he's got this idea from, that she was just giving legal advice.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't seem credible.
there's a question about what's the line, but Jenna Ellis didn't do anything.
Okay.
And you can also take a look at Mark Meadows going after former administration. Now, I'll tell you what's really shocking is acting Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark. He's quite literally appointed to a government position. Trump asks him a question about policy and he says, here's how it works. Here's what I think would happen. And they criminally charge him for it.
Okay. That's a crazy claim.
It's funny because like when I heard this the first time, I like stopped the video and I sat in like silence for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, we know about old Jeffrey Clark, don't we?
Yeah, so if you guys didn't watch our January 6th coverage, Jeffrey Clark was very prominent. He was the lawyer who was known as the Enron lawyer, the lawyer who defended Enron.
Right.
He was the assistant deputy, as Tim said. He's the lawyer who wrote the email that said that the Attorney General's office of the United States of America had evidence, or I forget the exact phrase he used. He said something like, they have like legitimate concerns, okay, about election fraud, which, by the way, was not true. That was a complete lie. At the time that he wrote that email, the Attorney General and the Attorney General's office said that they had no evidence that there was voter fraud that would have affected the election. So he writes this that they had concerns, which is a straight up lie, and that in the email they wanted to send this email out to the states. And in the email, Jeffrey Clark said that he basically was trying to convince state legislatures to throw out the votes in these swing states and just vote for Donald Trump. And he created this email and he sent it to Trump, and Trump said, "This is great. I want you," and he goes to the Attorney General, who is, I forget his name. It was after Bill Barr had already quit. And he goes to the Attorney General and he says, "I want you to send out this email." The Attorney General says, "There is no reality where I will send out this email." This email, he called it a suicide pact. He's like, this email seems pretty illegal and is just not true, and I'm not sending this out. And so Trump essentially fires that guy, and he says, and he goes to Jeffrey Clark and he says, "Okay, I'm going to make you Attorney General. I want you to send out that email." And then the guy, the Attorney General that Trump just fired, basically goes into Trump's office with Jeffrey Clark and with the Assistant Attorney General, and they have like a 4-hour debate about whether they should actually send this email. They end up convincing Donald Trump not to send the email. They end up convincing Donald Trump to unfire this guy. And then they all just go back to work.
Right.
Right. And so now you can make the argument that Donald Trump shouldn't get in trouble, or even Jeffrey Clark shouldn't get in trouble, because even though he created this email, they never actually went through with it. And okay, that's fine. You can make that argument. But to just claim
that was
that-
just legal advice.
that was just legal advice is not remotely accurate.
Yeah, that's a wild claim. Yeah. He was going to literally make that attorney head of the Justice Department so he could send that out. The thing that they used against him, they said half of the Justice Department would resign. Like half of the employees, I think. They have thousands of employees that would
all over the country,
that would quit.
Yeah, he said he said you would be serving over a graveyard. That was the line he used.
Right. Yeah.
And he said he thought that line struck a chord with Trump, and that was part of what convinced Trump to not go through with it.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that Fani Willis is trying to indict former executive branch officials for giving their legal opinions as is their duty is insane.
Well, I think if it's as laughable a case as you're claiming, I guess it will be a very easy day in court. Also worth saying, Fani Willis
and hundreds of thousands of dollars out of their pocket.
Exact same grand jury that decided to push charges against Donald Trump also is going after a bunch of Antifa activists in Georgia.
It's the same grand.
For Stop Cop City.
It's not the same
bringing
people.
them up on. It was the same grand jury,
different
people,
same courtroom,
obviously.
different people.
But
okay, that's it. That's funny because that's Jimmy Dore was saying that it was the same group of people too. So
he
that's
got
not
that
true.
wrong.
Yeah, I guess I actually didn't look into that. So,
Funny.
But based either way, screw those Antifa people.
It's the same grand jury that decided to prosecute some people on racketeering charges.
And the Democrat recused herself from all the criminal proceedings.
My point here is this, to my estimation, seems to be the Justice Department functioning as it should be. Hold on.
This is Georgia. This is state level stuff.
So
not DOJ.
The Justice Department, meaning the justice system of the United States. Fine. What I think is happening here is, I think, frankly, you have a business relationship with the Trump campaign. You're doing events with Trump.
This is so bad faith. Oh my God.
Look, she doesn't know anything about the stuff that they're talking about. But then she's just going to accuse him of being a Trump, basically a Trump loyalist, a secret Trump loyalist.
Well, like, you can, I think it would be more fair to be like, okay, I think you're biased politically in one direction, right? And I don't know if Tim has specifically said he supports Trump over Biden or not.
Oh yeah, he definitely supports Trump, but I don't know that he's working for the Trump campaign.
Right. So you can, like, if he said that, you can make those claims and you could say, well, I think you're biased, blah, blah, blah. But to say, like, you have a business relationship just because he's going down, I think Tim is going to Florida soon to have a conversation with Donald Trump Jr. To me, that's like pretty wild. Like, I mean, Tim is a guy who does news, he does interviews. Obviously, he's going to jump at the shot to interview Donald Trump Jr., or I'm sure he would jump at the shot to interview Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or anyone. So,
do you know that Brianna Wu was paying streamers to produce political content? And I guess they were doing it on Twitch, but it breaks the TOS of Twitch. So they stopped doing it on Twitch. They only do it on YouTube. This is not a secret. She's talked about this openly. And I think she paid Wick TV to put some debate together.
Okay. I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that as long as it's like known. That
in the open.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'm only saying it to, this is the mindset that she has. And she thinks Tim Cass is doing the same type of operation. So, but I don't know that Tim would even consider doing something like that, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah. Tim wants to have access to people in the Republican Party. I think Tim would like to have access to people in the Democratic Party as well. But I don't think he's paying people. He's that interested in an election that would be going out of his way to pay people to promote Donald Trump on their YouTube channel. Do you think that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a weird claim. Again, you want to make some claim that you think he's biased politically. Fair enough. You can have an argument about that. The pay thing. Just I don't know. That seems wacky to me.
Right.
And
Junior at Trump.
I think that it would lead a reasonable person watching your show on the outside to go, what is going on here? Is Tim really being an impartial observer of this?
That's bad faith.
No, I mean, if I'm wrong, please tell me.
Well, it's completely factually incorrect.
So when have you criticized the Trump, like just Trump in general?
This is what I said. We're running into the issue of people who often come from the other side don't watch the show. They'll see selective clips. How about we talk about when I called for Donald Trump to be criminally investigated for the death of an 8-year-old American girl in Yemen?
Okay.
I do that all the time.
Okay.
How about all of the issues we've brought up pertaining to he stopped disclosing the number of drone strikes happening in the Middle East and the argument around that?
Sure. But you're still going to vote for him.
Oh, yeah. My position is we are looking at a deeply broken and corrupt system that has been for quite some time. And don't get me wrong, the U.S. has a lot of really great things about it. In fact, it's probably the best country on the planet in a lot of different ways. But to sit back and take a look at like how the FDA revolving door politics work, how the Obama administration and the big bank...
FDA revolving door politics?
Yeah.
This really bugs me because I don't see what Tim Pool is doing as any different than what Brianna Wu is doing. But for some reason, when Tim Pool does it, it's bad. Well, she's making the argument that Tim Pool is parading around like he's unbiased and that who he votes for is like some big secret. But he said openly he's going to vote for Trump and that he supports Trump. So how is that any different than what Brianna Wu is doing, saying, she openly supports Biden and, she's even willing to go to the extent of paying people to promote for Biden? Like what is different about these
I can tell you exactly what's going on here. It's because this is the thing that got a lot of people in Destiny's audience triggered at us. It's the idea that someone is saying, hey, I'm like not politically biased. I'm in the center. I'm an enlightened centrist. I'm a moderate. And then the perception of, well, that's not true. You're just very clearly on one side. Right.
Right.
Like if Tim came out and said he's a Republican and everyone just kind of perceived him as a Republican, he perceived himself as a Republican, like they wouldn't like him, but they would just kind of view him as like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or something. A lot of the animosity, I think, comes from the whole I'm not a Republican, blah, 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 blah. That's where I think that's what's kind of motivating what she's talking about.
So that is what she's trying to expose here. With us, it's like more laughable, obviously. You voted for Biden and I voted for Kanye. So
right. Yeah. I know,
it's like.
So.
Yes. Right. Like someone will work for a major pharmaceutical and then when they retire, they get appointed to the FDA.
Okay. Understood.
Right. This has been going on forever.
Right.
You take a look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You take a look at Monsanto. You take a look at how the United States gives favorable. Look at 2008. Let's talk about the housing crisis, which destroyed middle-class Americans.
Yeah.
The banks were offloading their screw up, and none of them get arrested for the fraud they committed.
Matt Taibbi wrote a fantastic book about this. Everyone should read. Just to come back to Eric Holder a minute in Gamergate, history has not been rough enough to Eric Holder and his failure to do.
Look, you got a camera pan, Sitch. He's actually in it.
Do anything.
No,
Trump, I didn't vote for him in 20.
I just thought it was funny that they brought up my favorite issue, the housing crash, complained about Eric Holder not bringing charges, and brought up Matt Taibbi's book on the housing crash. So there you go.
Yeah, that's good, right? I've never read Matt Taibbi's book.
Called Divide, I think, if I recall correctly. I read it a while ago. It was pretty decent.
2016, and I think, oh boy.
Wait, so he said he didn't vote for Trump 2016, right?
Come back to Eric Holder a minute in Gamergate. History has not been rough enough to Eric Holder and his failure to do anything.
Trump, I didn't vote for him in 2016, and I think, oh boy, he did a lot of what I expected it to be. I mean, come on, John Bolton, the people he brought in and brought around him. They say like, oh, did he drain the swamp? And I'm like, come on, man. There were some things he did that I liked. The economy was doing better. He brought back $3 billion worth.
Okay, so anyway. Okay, so I want to skip ahead to a different section. I think the thing that also triggers Brianna and a lot of other people on the left is that it seems like when Tim, now I don't watch him enough to say this like 100% certainty, but it seems like when Tim complains about the right, it's kind of like he's more complaining about like establishment right neocon stuff as opposed to like the populist energy. And that's probably what sets off Brianna and people on the left, is seeing him as like, in their eyes as not being truthful in terms of saying that you're not on the left and the right.
Yeah, he's not a Democrat, so they hate his guts.
Right. Well, what I'd be curious to see, and I haven't watched him enough to see this, is I have seen clips where he's had people on the right on his show who make these like insanely wild accusations about, all of these things, all like about the Democrats and all this stuff. And I don't hear any pushback.
That's a fair criticism.
And so what I would question is, okay, if he has a Democrat or someone on the left on and they do that, is there no pushback too? Or is there pushback only from the left? And I don't know the answer to the question because I don't watch the show enough to do that. And also, I think, and maybe part of the reason that doesn't, if it's true, that doesn't happen, is that a lot of times people on the left go on the show primarily to argue with him. A lot of people on the show that are on the right go on the show just to expose people to their views and just to kind of like talk. So,
right. No, I think it's safe to say it has a right-wing bias. The show definitely has a right-wing bias.
well, obviously, I mean, I would imagine he has a primarily right-wing audience if you did a poll.
Right.
I would imagine. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
Well, we have a like 60-40 right-wing audience, so.
sure. But I think it's between, like, I don't know. I would be surprised if Tim had a 60-40 breakdown in his audience.
No.
So
You think he's got like a 90-10 breakdown?
I think he's got like an 80 right wing, 20 non-affiliated. That'd be my guess.
Right.
People to say, like, we are on the verge, among many other things. There's grains of sand that ultimately make a heap. But these are things that are leading to the bifurcation of this country.
So I know this sounds idealistic, Tim, but this is something Cenk and I talk about a lot. That I think that this is something that's meant to divide us. And I want to be really clear. I have a different assessment of LGBT rights than I think you do. But at the same time, in my experience, like when I ran for office, I counted it one time. It was tens, 20, 30,000 conversations I had when I ran for office, getting off effing Twitter, out there in the real world, shaking their hands, talking to people, meeting them at the door, asking questions. What's important to you? What's important in your kid's life? What's the biggest policy issue that you care about? And overwhelmingly, Republican or Democrat, it is housing. It is real wages. And something Cenk and I feel very, very, very strongly about is, yes, this stuff is important to me, but if we're looking at getting America back on the right track, we've got to focus more broadly on what impacts your audience's lives. And just one more thing. I think if your audience was being real and they were in the room today, I think they would tell me they care a lot more about how they're going to pay their rent than that damn book.
So the book she's talking about is, the genderqueer book and all that, that gross stuff that's been in schools. So basically, she's making the argument. We've heard this a lot. People made this argument directly to us. The whole, why do you fixate on culture war when all that matters is left-wing economic policy prescriptions?
Right. Yeah. And I usually dismantle that argument relatively quickly by using the analogy, would you vote for lower housing costs if it came attached to racism?
Right.
Right. She's basically saying, look, you shouldn't care about the pornographic book in your kid's school because you're going to get lower housing costs.
Yes.
Like nobody's going to take that offer. Okay. Yes. People don't throw away their moral principles so that they can get a better deal on a house.
Yeah, some people will, but most people won't, or they won't at least admit to that because that would seem immoral to do such an action, which is kind of ironic that a lot of people on the left make this argument.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, but they're going to stand fast by their moral principles, of course. What? Lower housing with racism? Hell no. Get out of here.
Yeah, it's like, listen, we can lower the cost of housing and raise, the minimum wage, but it only applies to white people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, yeah, they're not gonna vote for that. Of course.
Well, I mean, maybe if white people don't participate, they would vote for it, but we'll see.
Right. But this is what I always say to them, and I don't think they don't believe me, is that, listen, I agree with you. You talk to someone, you talk about what's the biggest issue in their daily life, right? Most people probably not going to be fixated on, genderqueer being in schools
No,
or
of course
some other
not.
woke issue, whatever. There's something more tangible. However, what I keep trying to impart to them is, yes, while people are motivated by economic issues in terms of that's how they perceive the world, they're not voting on those economic issues because the economic policy is too obnoxious and complicated for anyone to really figure out. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, which party seems to me to be the moral party? Because really, when people are voting for economic policy, they're voting on who do they trust? Because and the Democrats kind of miss on this one is that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, they're both making an argument to their audience where they say, listen, we're going to give you economic policy that's going to make your life better. They're both saying the same thing. And then if you're a voter, you say, well, who do I trust in this situation? Because I don't have the prerequisite knowledge to dive into the complicated economic policy to try to figure out that answer. And they say, okay, well, then who do I trust? Do I trust the person who's saying, listen, it's totally fine if we put this book that has, sex acts of children performing on each other in school, or claiming that book is like fake news, even though I'm staring at it and I saw an article about it? Or do I trust the person that says this book is degenerate and horrible and it should be taken out of schools and what the hell's wrong with people that want it in school?
Yeah, you're going to go with the second guy, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what they don't understand. And that's why this argument is so weak, where they keep trying to do this, like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain thing, pay no attention to the woke crap behind the curtain and all this nonsense. It's like, okay, listen, if you really want voters to fixate on economic issues like you claim, you need to have Democratic politicians go out there and they need to actually say, this is trash, this is garbage, the people pushing this are trash, the people pushing this are garbage, they're distracting from the real issue. You can't just say, don't pay attention to it. You actually have to have people come out and denounce it.
True.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Most people.
So why did we not talk about that as much?
But I think that is the issue. I think the issue is people looked at 2019 and the strong economic numbers, and then the Democratic Party's underhanded manipulations to try and stop Trump, and that is ripping this country to shreds.
I don't agree it was underhanded.
Well, so like the first impeachment we now know was a hoax, right?
That face is so good. What?
That when he said that, it hurt. Oh man, so I'm like, no. I'm like, no, Tim, please.
Ukraine did.
Okay, I don't share that assessment.
But it's only because you don't know, right? You didn't read the
I
sworn.
followed that pretty closely.
Have you read the sworn affidavits out of Ukraine? Have you read the New York Times report on what Ukraine was engaged in during the 2016 election? Do you know who Viktor Shokin is?
Do you know
about?
I listened to the hearings, and I cannot give you direct quotes of everything that happened back then. Hold on. But I remember hearing the phone call. Who is the NSA guy that came in? Alexander Vindman. Hearing his testimony, I think that what Trump did was very clearly a shakedown.
What did Trump do?
He tried to influence the foreign policy of the United States to dig up dirt on his political opponent.
What's wrong with that?
Sitch, what's wrong with that? What's the matter with that?
I don't. Why is it wrong for the president of the United States to use the power of his office to try to dig up dirt on his primary political opponent that he's going to run against?
Nixon told me when the president does it, it isn't illegal.
It's weird. I think I understand.
Illegal.
I think I understand why Tim is asking this question, and he'll kind of get into it. But it's one of those things that's annoying because it's like one of those things that's on its face, so obvious. Like, why are you asking me this question? Like, how do you argue that should be legal for the? I mean, that's the whole complaint about Biden right now, is that he's using the power of his office to go after Trump illegally, right? Or
of course,
corruptly. That's the entire argument against him.
Of course, yeah.
It is obviously wrong because you cannot
should Joe Biden be impeached for telling AG Merrick Garland to go after Trump?
I don't.
New York Times reported Joe Biden went to Merrick Garland and instructed him to go after Trump.
So I admit, when he said this, I had never heard that before. And I was like, what? And I thought, okay, it's possible I never heard this before because, I don't follow all the narratives. And obviously this is a narrative. If it was true, the more mainstream media would try to hide that. and the right wing media would try to blow that up. But even when, I follow a lot of right wing sources, and I never heard that until Tim made this claim, and he said the New York Times reports it. So I went and I found the article, or at least what I assume was the article he was talking about. And there was a New York Times article where an anonymous source claimed that Joe Biden expressed not to Merrick Garland, but to some people, some unnamed group of people that were not Merrick Garland. It wasn't even really clear to me whether he was talking to people in his staff or like donors or something, but that he was, annoyed in terms of feeling that Merrick Garland was not moving fast enough on, going after Trump for January 6th stuff. And then right under it, immediately
who's
in the
anonymous source? Is it the person that heard the person that heard?
A source,
Joe Biden?
A source familiar with the, the incident.
It's like, okay.
Right.
This is horrible.
Right.
This is horrible.
And then, because then right under it in the New York Times article, it says like, Joe Biden did not express this to Merrick Garland whatsoever.
Right.
And so, so I'm like, okay, well, you have an anonymous source and he didn't say it to Merrick Garland and blah, 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 blah. So you have all that stuff. But then it's like, it annoys me because I don't know, because again, I didn't watch Tim at the time. I don't know if in 2020, when Donald Trump went on Fox News and literally said, I'm telling Bill Barr that he should indict Joe Biden a month before the election for the Trump-Russia investigation. His claim was that Joe Biden was somehow involved in the Trump-Russia investigation or the improper aspects of the Trump-Russia investigation. And so therefore Joe Biden should be indicted a month before the election. And Trump is telling Bill Barr to do this. And when he's on Fox News and he talks about this, he not only says that he's telling Bill Barr to do this, he makes it sound like he'd had several conversations with Bill Barr that he wanted him to do this, and Bill Barr kept telling him that he didn't want to do it, or that there wasn't enough evidence to do it. Because he makes a comment where he's like, they're telling me they don't have enough information. I'm saying, Bill, you have enough to go. You should go for it, Bill. Do it. And I'm like, where was the outrage there? You have the sitting president a month before the election is literally directing on television the attorney general to go indict the person running against him.
The argument Tim is making is that both sides do it and therefore it's okay. I mean, that's clearly what he said.
Well, no, but is that what he's saying? Because they're talking about.
He said, what's wrong with that? He's like, the Democrats do it too.
Yeah, but then but that's a bad argument if it's Trump did it first, isn't it? If it's like Trump tried to withhold foreign policy in order to screw over Biden, Trump directed his attorney general to indict Biden. So they did it first. And then now the Democrats are doing it. Well, then you don't get to complain about it, which I'm assuming Tim has complained about Biden doing this on his show. I could be wrong. Maybe he says it's totally fine. Maybe he said, listen, Trump did it, so what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't know if he's made that argument.
Look, Bill Barr all throughout his book said Trump was asking him inappropriate shit all the time, and he was constantly trying to distance himself from Trump.
Right.
So obviously there's supposed to be some. You're not supposed to have it's not supposed to optically look as though you're working in tandem with the executive. You're supposed to have independent, unbiased litigation for the government. Right. So
there was a question, I don't remember the answer to it, because I remember this came up when Trump was president, about whether it was even, I don't know if it was supposed to be legal or just not supposed to be done, that the president was not supposed to be directing the attorney general.
They're not supposed to be. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's just like a precedent thing or a legal thing.
Right.
So
it might just be a precedent thing.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think that there is a very big difference in someone giving the Justice Department a free hand to pursue illegalities where they may exist and someone doing a shakedown,
Does Donald Trump
threatening things that affect our geostability in the entire world and the national security policy of the United States.
See, but this is where if she just said like, I never heard that, can you bring up that article? I would love to look at it.
Right.
So
that's a Sam Cedar move right there.
Well, I think it's fair if someone's making a claim, because you could say it's like, well, that sounds really bad. Obviously, if Joe Biden went to Merrick Garland,
Sam Cedar will make you read the whole article too.
Well, that's true, right? But like, if Joe Biden went to Merrick Garland and said, and he sniffed his hair, right? He got really close to Merrick Garland and sniffed his hair and said, "Hey, Merrick, I want you to go after Trump for January 6th." And Merrick Garland said, "Oh, but Mr. Biden, we investigated it and we just couldn't find enough evidence to charge him with anything. He seems innocent. And Joe said, listen here, bucko. Okay.
Dog face, pony shoulder.
Yeah, listen here, you dog-faced pony soldier. Dark Brandon is telling you to go after Trump. Like, right, then obviously you're like, holy crap, like that's insane. He should be impeached if that's like what happened. So it's like, okay, I want to know exactly what, the claim is.
Do you think Donald Trump authority to withhold congressionally approved loan guarantees to Ukraine unless they took the political action he wanted?
I think at the core, Donald Trump is a crook.
Okay, can you answer? Do you think Donald Trump had the authority to do that?
I would need to sit down and look at that particular instance. But
so
my
you don't
recollection of the first.
So there is a mistake here, or at least what I believe is a mistake. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that Trump was withholding military aid to Ukraine that was appropriated by Congress.
Okay.
Right? Trump withholds military aid. Yeah. He said loan guarantee, which is a very different thing.
Well, you might have just misspoke.
Well, which I didn't really realize until I was looking into this more. The thing with Joe Biden going to Ukraine and saying that they weren't going to give them $1 billion, that was not the United States giving Ukraine $1 billion. That was a loan guarantee for $1 billion.
Okay.
The loan guarantee means Ukraine was going to get a $1 billion loan from the IMF. But the IMF didn't trust Ukraine enough on its own that if they didn't,
I got you. So if they default on the loan, America's on the hook.
Bingo. Yeah. Right. And that's very different than giving a country military aid in the form of weapons or direct payments or something to that effect.
We're just vouching for them. We're basically co-signing on a loan.
And I actually spent an inordinate amount of time yesterday trying to look into this, and I could not find the answer on what is the exact law governing presidential authority over loan guarantees. Because my understanding,
when the loan goes bust, the president's going to be gone, right?
Well, presumably. I mean, it depends how long the loan before. But in terms of what authority the president has to block or sign off on loan guarantees, and I went down this huge rabbit hole and I still never found the answer, but the way in which America gives loan guarantees versus the way in which America gives aid is completely different legally, and there are different laws governing it. And it seemed to me that the executive office had a lot more power over these loan guarantees than they do over foreign aid, direct foreign aid, which to my understanding, the way it basically works is that Congress will sign off on foreign aid. Congress can write stipulations into the foreign aid that says like a country has to do X, Y, Z before they get it. And then the executive branch basically has to do it unless they have some hyper compelling reason like terrorism, like they think the money is going to be used for terrorism or something to that effect.
So they're just forced to sign off on it
they have to do it. And that's
for the foreign aid. Okay.
Right. And this is what came up in Trump's first impeachment. And part of why Vindman, did the whistleblowing and everyone, Congress got so mad was that Trump withholding the aid, not only because he was doing it for corrupt reasons to dig up dirt on Joe Biden, but it seemed like he didn't really have the legal authority to withhold the aid anyway, at least on those grounds specifically.
Well, he had his pen was out of ink, Sitch. What is he going to do? Like he couldn't sign the thing.
There you go. That's very possible. I didn't consider that.
Isn't this how? So this makes sense because this is how he was able to hold up the aid because all he had to do was sign the document and the aid goes through, but he just withholds his signature and
that's true.
Stopped.
That is
it stopped, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And it's also kind of an annoying argument because even if theoretically it is legal for Trump to do that, no one would argue, I would imagine no one would argue that it's not corrupt. It's obviously corrupt to do that, even if it was legal to do that.
So did he just put the document like in his desk? He's like, "Here, I'll sign this when I have time." What happens there?
Listen, when the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago and they went through his desk to find confidential documents, they actually found the document. He shoved in the bottom of the desk. He just forgot it was there. He shoved in the bottom of the desk and then he just forgot it was there.
Wouldn't that be hilarious? Wouldn't that be hilarious if he hid the document and they had to bring up another copy of the document? They keep bringing the document to him and he keeps getting lost over and over again. He's got in the box. It's like a pile of the same document over and over again.
No, they call the plumber because the toilets are stopped up, and he plunges, and you see it's like all these documents, like the same document, just keeps getting flushed down the toilet.
Well, that makes sense on how he was able to do that. Because
There you
I
go.
kept thinking, like, what do you do? You call the State Department up and say, hey, put a hold on that check to Ukraine.
Yeah, well, that was part of the issue is that, if I recall, because it's been a while, there was like this weird thing where the people, whoever like were in charge of holding the money or the aid or whatever it was,
Right.
were like
It's
freaking out
in the
because they're like,
bank account.
yeah, because they're like, you're not supposed to just be holding this. Like they were like freaking out here. Like they kept pestering Trump to like do it.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
And obviously none of this was happening with the loan guarantee. So,
Right, because all it is a cosign.
right.
But I'm
And the
sure they
loan,
have to get a signature on that.
right. Well, well, no, they
What
do.
did it end up being? Did you ever figure it out?
I did.
Okay.
Because here's the thing.
This is first impeachment, right?
This is first impeachment. With the loan guarantee for Biden and Obama to Ukraine, which is what he's comparing it to, it was publicly known at the time in December that Joe Biden was withholding the loan guarantee until they fired Shokin. There's literally articles about it in December of 2015 that talk about this. It wasn't like a secret. And then after that, in 2016, January, February, March, blah, 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 there's all these. Obama is making public statements. The White House is putting out public statements saying that they're withholding the loan guarantee until they
Shokin
further
gets fired,
negotiations with Ukraine. So it's not a secret. Congress knows about it. This is all out in the open. No one is complaining about this whatsoever. Congress is not saying this is illegal. No one is complaining about it. And then even when they fire Shokin in March, it takes them until June to actually sign off on the loan guarantee, and there's no one complaining about it whatsoever. So to me, obviously, it seemed like whatever that was going on was acting within the executive branch's legal authority to do that.
So in the Biden situation, it was a loan guarantee. In the Trump situation, it was actually foreign aid.
It was military aid.
Okay.
I believe it was military aid.
Impeachment was very well founded.
Okay, so the issue at question is,
And
well, I mean, if you
most
don't know
people-
about it,
most people looked at this when it happened and reached the same assessment that I did.
I think saying most people is probably, one, an appeal to authority, but doesn't apply when the country is split in half, right? With 75 million people voted for Donald Trump, clearly they didn't agree with what you're saying.
I think something you're really skilled at doing is you find these edge cases that prove a point you want to have. I think directionally, most reasonable people would look at the phone call that he had, that Alexander Vindman came forward and talked about, and understand that's an underhanded thing to do.
Right, so it's really easy to use. This is a beautiful trick of the corporate press. And I'll criticize a right-wing publication for using this technique. The CDC recently came out, said with the B2, I think it was the B286 variant, those who have immunity, either because...
Okay, before we get into this, what Brianna said is very bizarre. This is not an edge case. This was a major this was like the primary factor of the first impeachment.
Right.
And I agree with Tim that simply saying, well, most people agreed is a bad argument. Now I understand where she's coming from because she's probably never been challenged on this subject. And it's one of those things that so on its face seems obviously like wrong. So, holding up foreign aid in order to try to dig up dirt on your political opponent, that you could be stunned and sort of like, I don't even know how to explain why that's bad, because everyone agrees that it's bad. Right.
Right.
It's kind of like when
corrupt as hell.
Right. It's kind of like when people first asked, like, well, can you define, when someone said like, oh, can you define what a woman is? And they try to use that argument. Matt Walsh adopted that argument, but originally that was the left attacking people saying there's only two genders. And it's one of those things that people just intuitively understood for so long that they didn't really have a good answer.
Because of previous COVID infection or the COVID vaccine are more susceptible to this virus. Leading report, I think it's called, tweeted, the CDC says if you've been vaccinated, you're more likely to catch the new variant, which is cutting out a large portion of the context. So it's masterfully done. I think it was masterfully done how the Democrats took a legitimate national security issue for which Trump did what he was supposed to do and turned it into Trump did something wrong. But of course, you'd hold that position if you don't actually know the circumstances around it.
Tim,
if the only thing
I would
you know,
ask you to talk to me with respect. I did follow this.
But no. It's not a question of respect that you don't know this. It's not a question of being disrespectful or respectful.
I don't focus on the same edge cases.
It's not an edge case. It's the impeachment of the president. This is the first impeachment of Donald Trump and why it was done and who did it. So there's a whole lot to this. For instance, Joe Biden we now know was involved with Hunter Biden's business dealings. Of course, at the time they said it wasn't true. We now know that he used an alias, was it Robert L. Peters or Robert Ware, to provide government information to Hunter Biden and to Devin Archer as they were engaged in foreign business dealings. By all means, you can think that's fine. That's not the issue at question.
No, it's not that I think.
So I did try to look into these claims. Because I obviously, we'd heard about the fact that Biden using aliases and things of that nature. And I think even someone on Tim's show said it wasn't that weird for famous people to do this in case their emails get hacked or whatever. But he said that he was providing government information to Hunter Biden. And the only thing I could find I only found two things that would even be remotely like this. There was one where it was actually the inverse. Hunter Biden was trying to recommend to his father someone who he thought his father should have be in some government vacancy role.
Okay.
So it was the inverse of that. And then the other thing, and this is the thing that a lot of people were fixating on, was that Joe Biden, in one of these emails, gave his schedule of the day to Hunter Biden, or emailed his schedule of what he was going to be doing that day. And on that schedule, it has that he has a phone call with the president of Ukraine. And so people point to that and they say, aha, there's something nefarious going on there. And you could say, okay, maybe not, because also part of the schedule directly under that was apparently Joe Biden and his family were doing a get-together to mourn the 1-year anniversary of the death of his firstborn son. And so it's like, well, is he giving him the schedule because he wants him to know he's talking to the president of Ukraine, or is he giving him the schedule because he wants him to be at this anniversary of his son's death situation?
Right.
I think it's fine. Is that the assessment I reach is, look, if the Justice Department wants to investigate Hunter Biden and look at the stuff with Joe Biden, I have zero issue with that.
Donald Trump was the Justice Department.
The difference in...
Oh,
Did he say Donald Trump was the Justice Department?
yeah. That's not a good,
Yeah.
you don't want to hear that. I wouldn't feel comfortable if someone said Joe Biden is the Justice Department or the President's the Justice Department or, whatever. Kind of reminds me of Palpatine saying, I am the Senate.
Yeah, because you want to think that those institutions are independent of whatever some politician is trying to wield them for.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And there's a difference between, there's a huge difference between Donald Trump going to Bill Barr or Sessions, I think at the time, and saying, I want you to investigate this Joe Biden Burisma. I want you to investigate whether Joe Biden fired or pressured the president of Ukraine to fire fire Shokin in order to protect Burisma. There's a big difference between doing that and then, which obviously you can already say has, there's problems doing that, right? But there's a big difference between doing that and withholding foreign aid to a foreign country, demanding that they essentially announce that they're going to investigate Burisma in order to create this atmosphere of making Joe Biden look bad.
Yeah, those are completely different things.
Yeah, that's pretty different.
Most people don't know that difference exists, though, Sitch. The chances are good that Brianna Wu doesn't know that situation, that difference exists.
Maybe.
Our assessment here is I have no objection to the rule of law in the Justice Department looking into politicians that do things that are wrong. I think we need 1,000,000 times more of it. I think you and I would probably agree. There was a bill before the House when Nancy Pelosi was in charge looking at insider trading by Congress.
Agreed.
Of course that should be passed.
So let me ask you.
Of course, and they don't do that. I want to see much more aggressive.
Right. We agree. But
Sure.
let's get to the core of the impeachment.
Just one more thing about this, because I think that when you're a public figure, you're held to higher standards of ethics and behavior. I think we're far too willing to let our own side.
Just 1 second. I'm trying to change the topic here. Just let me change the topic, please. I don't want to talk about impeachment. I don't know much about it. Look, I followed it at the time, and I only read the New York Times. And everything they said seemed credible to me. Can we move on, please?
You can ask the way that I had this conversation is to just say, well, you know, to really actually try to engage with what Tim's saying, to break down, to try to find what the argument.
Well,
that
this
he's
is why he
making
throws out so many names and stuff. It's just for
I know,
someone
it makes
that's
it
not
difficult.
familiar with the
I know.
topic, they have no idea.
Yeah, but I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
So
They don't know the difference between a loan guarantee and
well,
military
I
aid.
didn't either. I literally didn't know that either. Until
Yeah, but
like
as soon as as soon as you dig in, as soon as we talk about it on the show,
right,
it becomes. I mean, I remember it. I'm building a narrative of the entire situation in my head.
right.
But until you build these narratives, you're just BSing. Basically, you don't know. Look, you want to change the subject.
You're right. Right.
Tim sits around 5 days a week and talks about this stuff. He's
Yes.
just like, look, you're not going to be ready.
Yeah, right. Of course.
Yeah, you're just not going to be ready. He knows too many of the facts that you don't know.
Off the hook. And respectfully, I think you're doing that with Donald
Should
Trump.
Joe Biden be impeached for threatening the president of Ukraine with withholding congressionally approved loan guarantees unless they fired the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma?
I've never read anything like that.
How does she not know? Like, oh my God. How does she not know that? This was pretty shocking to me. I was like, how does this is like the whole crux of the issue.
Yeah. Well, she does not really engage with any right-wing media unless it's, studying up for Tim Pool's show to get some gotchas on him.
Like, this is the okay. I don't know. I don't know how you could pay attention to the first the first Trump impeachment,
And not know this, yeah.
Yeah, because this was the central claim. This was the central claim was about this issue.
Yep.
Like, you could say that maybe you think there's more to it. And this is what gets annoying too. Like, I get this when I have this conversation with people, they enter this cognitive dissonance mode where they say, yes, but Sitch, Joe Biden went on stage and said this thing.
As
And
if that matters.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, no, listen, I'm not, I understand that he said the thing. That's not the contention. And that's not the contention that people knowledgeable, I guess Brianna's not, but that's not the contention that most people are making the case. The case isn't whether he did it or not. The case is what motivated the action.
Well, and if he had legal authority.
Sure. And so unless Joe Biden went on stage and said, by the way, I told him to fire Shokin because I wanted to help my son get a cool $5 million from Burisma. Like, it's like, okay, that's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
But it is, I could not believe that she did not know about this. So
That's true.
Okay, yes, Joe Biden is on camera sitting with the Council on Foreign Relations, and he said, I went to Ukraine and I spoke with the president, and he said, unless you fire the prosecutor, you're not getting the $1 billion. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
Okay, we'll have to pull that video up. You see, this is the challenge. Right now, not only have we had a sworn affidavit.
Sitch, what should she do here? Because there's no way. Like, there's so much context here that you can't learn this stuff. And
well, she actually does a decent-ish job when she watches the clip in response.
Okay.
Which is what you should do is say, I'm not familiar with that. Can you show me the clip?
Right.
Like, that would be like the way you would I would think that would be the best way to handle a situation.
I mean, we need to do one of these short streams just on this topic.
It's a very complicated topic.
It is, yeah.
There's a million parts to it. And
totally complicated. A lot of people throw out things that you'll think, oh, that completely blows the narrative, but it really doesn't if you dig in. Like,
and the more I look into this, there is an argument against America's involvement with Ukraine. And the argument is, the more I look into this, the more I find out that there's no evidence that Joe Biden fired or pressured them to fire the guy to protect Burisma, number one. But number two, that Ukraine is an insanely corrupt country. The amount of corruption in Ukraine is insane. And it's to the level that you might be like, okay, should we really be involved with this? That could be a legitimate argument for someone to make because the government of Ukraine was so heavily corrupted.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I don't blame anyone for wanting this to be investigated. It should be investigated. But once it's investigated and you don't find anything, you don't find a there, you do have to kind of accept it and move on at that point.
Yeah, exactly like the Russiagate stuff.
Right.
We have a sworn affidavit from Victor Shokin. We have additional statements from him.
Sworn affidavit from Victor Shokin. What is that worth, Sitch?
Let's see. It's about worth the toilet paper, the used toilet paper that's in my septic tank.
Victor Shokin has to be the most disgruntled ex-employee on the planet.
It's really annoying because Tim, and I've heard him do this a lot, he constantly brings up Victor Shokin's statements as if they mean anything. Like,
right.
Not only is Shokin, like, regardless of whether you think he was going after Burisma and whether Biden was wrong or right about the situation, regardless of that, Victor Shokin was obviously an insanely corrupt person himself.
Yes. Yeah.
Number one. And then number two, even if we didn't know he's 100% corrupt, if someone is accusing someone of corruption and that person says, no, you're the corrupt one, you shouldn't take either of those people's statements on face value as meaning anything. Like,
right.
Obviously, it's like, so what? Okay, you have to actually look at some evidence beyond that. Shokin just making a claim that he was actually not corrupt, it's worth nothing. And I don't know why it keeps getting brought up in this conversation.
We've said it before, but Shokin's MO was to shake down companies. So,
Well,
I mean, he's corrupt.
To be clear, people who worked under him's MO was to do that.
Look, I don't know why you always...
I'm just trying to think because someone's going to say, well...
As if he doesn't know. Like, he literally hired his driver. Like, because he trusts the guy.
I know. Listen,
It's so obvious this is like a mob situation.
I know.
And every time I bring this up, Sitch goes, well, the mafia boss, he was clean as a whistle.
I know.
It was all the murderers and thugs and criminals beneath him that were the ones
I'm just
that were
trying
guilty.
to be as precise as possible. Okay. To my understanding.
Look, if you think he's squeaky clean, that makes a difference. Then
I don't.
Then
I
Tim
don't
Pool
think
here. Look, as soon as you say that, then like you've gave people enough wiggle room that now they believe his statement.
Well, no. The problem is if you say Shokin was doing this, and then some researcher says, well, what it actually says is employees under him, including his friend, were doing this, and that when they were investigating it, Shokin stopped them from investigating it. So he's obviously protecting them, right? I'm just trying to be as clear as possible.
Look, take a clear stand here. Is Shokin corrupt?
Shokin is corrupt. Shokin is
Okay.
100% corrupt.
So when I say Shokin is corrupt, why do you say, well, technically,
because
he's not corrupt?
Because
it's just the people that work for him that were corrupt.
Because if you make
that makes him sound like a squeaky clean boss.
Okay, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Okay, if you make a claim, a specific claim where you say Shokin was doing these shakedowns, which to my understanding, we don't have 100% crystal clear evidence that happened, right? If you make that claim and someone looks into it and says that's not true, then they just automatically dismiss everything you're saying. They say, oh, well Adam is just wrong, right? So that's why I'm saying, to be very clear, we know with 100% certainty
squeaky clean
that Shokin was protecting his subordinates who were doing this, who were shaking down people. Now, I would imagine if you're, number one, if you're protecting your subordinates from doing this highly illegal action, that's obviously bad enough and corrupt already. But number two, I agree with you. It's not so much of a stretch to think that he was obviously getting some kickback. That's why he's protecting them.
That's my point.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to be clear.
Look, you can either.
Okay. It's fine. It's fine. We can move on.
The way that you say it, though, you're advocating for clarity and not delivering, because the way that you say it is completely unclear.
Okay.
You either believe, look, and you might not have some check to Shokin that he's cashed that is for a bribe, okay? So you can't necessarily prove it. But if you're not going to come out and say Shokin is corrupt, you don't.
Well, I did say Shokin was corrupt like a million times.
Well, I just said Shokin is corrupt, and you basically said, but...
Well, I'm just saying in the specific charge you're levying at him, we don't 100% know that.
Well, what is it? What is the way that I can levy this charge?
That Shokin was protecting his friends who were coercing bribes from people.
How about Shokin's department? The MO for Shokin's department, the MO for Shokin's office.
I think
was to shake down.
Yes.
Can I say that?
You can say that 100%. I'm on board with that.
Okay.
Because that is true.
So his MO was to shake down businesses
Right.
and take bribes from them to
Yes.
stop the investigations.
Yes.
So if that guy comes to you and says, look, I have a sworn affidavit that said I did nothing wrong, I'm completely innocent.
Right.
Tim Pool, will you read my affidavit on your show?
Right.
Look, I was framed.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Not a great.
I'm just trying to make the point here that what Tim Pool is doing is ridiculous.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Oh man, pulling up this stuff on the fly. Let's see.
That's fair.
Reputable news source.
I'll that you're unfamiliar with this. Probably better off pulling it up on Twitter, to be completely honest. But here's just the video of the CFR.
Hold on. What is this Twitter account? Can we go back?
I mean, therefore I am.
Okay.
Is a CFR video of Joe Biden not good enough for you though?
Convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess.
Can you start it over,
12,
Tim, so I can
13
really pay
times.
attention?
I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion.
Isn't this
They
about
said,
the
You have no
corruption?
authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. Well, I remember going.
Notice the at the time he said there?
Yeah, you see, he
At
hedged it a little bit.
the
Yeah.
time.
At the time, that was funny. Yeah.
Sitch and I have gone back and forth on whether this new guy that came in was corrupt or not. We think that he was okay at the time, but then Burisma got to him with a bribe or something. And
Well, there's a very long New Yorker article. His name's like Lutsenko or something. There's a very long New Yorker article where they talk to him. It's actually a very fascinating article if you read it, where before he was in the position, he actually was really anti-Burisma, which definitely gives more evidence to the fact that Biden was not doing something in favor of Burisma, because like this guy that they put that Ukraine put in place was very anti-Burisma, publicly before he was put in this position. And he seemed to be kind of more radical and anti-corruption. But then when he's in place, it kind of things start to change. And the question is, well, why did things change exactly? It could have been maybe, obviously we're speculating, it could have been a bribe. The person in New Yorker speculates that he actually said this, he wanted to be president of Ukraine. So it could be once he's in that position of power,
Really?
he starts playing the game of politics. And, obviously he ends up closing the investigation of Burisma and doing things that seem to be very helpful to Burisma. So
right. So he realizes Burisma is corrupt, but they're going to help him be president.
yeah, well, the thing that's crazy about Burisma, is that the president of Burisma was put in. He was assigned not by the President Poroshenko, who was president at the time, but by President Yanukovych. That's the guy who ran away to Russia,
right,
in 2014. He was good friends with the president of Burisma, and he puts the president of Burisma in charge of like the energy committee in Ukraine, the committee that like doles out the energy contracts. And what a surprise. He's giving all the best contracts to his own company, right?
Of course. Yeah. That's how you get most of the profit.
Yeah, exactly. So like and then when Yanukovych leaves and Poroshenko becomes president, he still was protecting Burisma, and he was still protecting the president of Burisma. And it seemed like they had some, kind of positive relationship with each other. So obviously there was a lot of the government of Ukraine itself seemed to be protecting Burisma to a large extent.
Right.
The assumption I'm going to make here.
I have a screen grab of the Devin Archer testimony, if that's relevant. I'm not sure it is.
Well, we'll bring it up. I wanted to watch this clip to 1 hour and 53 minutes.
Okay.
That's where we're going to stop. But
This is in good faith. The assumption I'm going to make here is there were issues with corrupt prosecutors in Ukraine.
False.
Right? As I understand.
False, Adam.
Yeah. Look, he said it so firmly that I have to believe it.
I know.
That is what was going on there. And I would strongly suspect that's what Biden is talking about, because there were issues getting people the money.
I mean, sure, when someone mugged someone, they said, I didn't mug them. I was just asking for the money. The evidence that we have currently is that Joe Biden was involved with Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. Hunter Biden was receiving $83,000 per month. With his partnership with Devin Archer, they were involved in a slew of business dealings for which Joe Biden claimed he wasn't involved, but we now know was using an alias to provide government information.
I feel like that quote would be really useful here, Sitch.
Yeah, you can bring it up, but yeah. So the we know he was involved was literally the schedule that had his son's death anniversary schedule. That's the quote, to my understanding. That's the only evidence I found of the Biden knowing involvement, which I think is very shaky. As we've talked about, and maybe you haven't heard it before. So basically what happened with Shokin was that there were two prosecutors, the ones that were, one of them was his good friend, one was actually a driver for him at some point. How he became a lawyer and a prosecutor is an interesting question, who were caught basically going around to businesses, and they would say, hey, if you don't want us to use the government authority invested in us to basically bring a bunch of claims against you, you need to pay us bribes. And when they raided these lawyers' houses, they found stacks of cash, they found guns, and they found I think something like 64 diamonds. They'd find all these diamonds and precious stones in their apartments. And so in Ukraine, this became known as the Diamond Prosecutors case. And you can actually look this up on Google. You can find this information about this. And so this became this huge controversy in Ukraine at this time, that these prosecutors were going around soliciting coercing businesses into doing bribes. And when they started to investigate this, Shokin shut down the investigations into his friends. And everyone in Ukraine basically lost their mind, essentially, over him doing this. And when you look at the timeline, because Joe Biden had the conversation in December trying to pressure them to fire Shokin, Shokin doesn't actually get let go by the Ukrainian parliament until the end of March. And
I'm talking specifically about Devin Archer.
Yeah, we'll go back to Devin Archer for 1 second. But I just want to say, so if you actually look at the timeline, it seems like the whole thing with the diamond thing that was local and what people were locally protesting about in Ukraine seemed to have a much greater effect on getting the parliament to actually get rid of Shokin than whatever Biden said in December.
So that was what was motivating the street protests to get him fired.
And I would argue the Ukrainian parliament. But
the argument that Tim and people on the right have about this is that Hunter Biden was hired to get Shokin fired. But according to Devin Archer, they didn't want to get Shokin fired, according to that Devin Archer testimony.
Right.
So I feel like that's directly contradictory to what Tim just said.
Yeah, that's what's weird too. I don't know if did you bring up the...
Yeah, I got it right here. Yeah.
Do you want me to... Are you going to read it? Do you want me to read it?
You can read it.
Okay, let me get it up. So this is in Devin. This is kind of annoying too, because I actually tweeted about this at the time. Everyone's saying, oh my God, Devin Archer's testimony is so annihilates Joe Biden. And then I read his testimony and I literally took the exact opposite from it. So in the testimony, they ask Devin Archer specifically, they say, are you aware that Vadim had told Blue Star that one of the issue pressures that he was facing was related to Shokin and the investigations into Burisma?
1 second here. On the Blue Star thing, do you think they named their lobbyist company with the initials BS on purpose?
I never thought about that. That's amazing.
I really feel like that was an inside joke with Hunter Biden. The Blue Star is the name of their Washington lobbying company.
Right.
Literally has the initials BS.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. That's so funny. But so then Devin Archer says, so yes, I was. The narrative that was spun to me, quite frankly, just to be, and I remember this because obviously it's the narrative that was spun to me, was that Shokin was under control and that whoever the next person that was brought in was, the fact that he was, this is the total, this is the narrative spun to me, that Shokin being fired was not good because he was under control as relates to Mykola. Mykola was the president
was
of
a
Burisma.
yeah, the president of Burisma.
Right.
So they're basically saying, look, Shokin's on the take here. We got that guy under control. And he almost starts to say, you know, if someone new comes in, that's kind of a wild card here that we don't necessarily
Right.
We don't know how that's going to go. So
Now,
the guy
Devin
who came in was the guy that Biden just said was, you know, good at the time, right?
Now to be clear, though, Devin does say under that, I have no way to verify that. That was spun to me from various folks in D.C., not Hunter specifically, but that's what I was led to believe. Whether it's true or not, I cannot speculate. So they do ask him this question again in the interview. He does repeat basically the same answer. And he basically says that the Burisma hired some Washington, D.C. lobbyist group to be their fixers on certain issues. And those fixers are the ones who told Devin Archer that Shokin was good for Burisma specifically. So I don't know how you can look at the Devin Archer testimony and say that it does not, I mean, it doesn't 100% prove Biden's innocent, but it definitely is a big piece of evidence in favor of Joe Biden being innocent on this charge, at least.
Right. If they hired Hunter Biden to deal with other issues like the passport issue,
the visa, but
yeah, the visa issue, because the guy lost his visa and he was trying to get his visa back, and didn't want Shokin fired, but Shokin gets fired anyway. It's completely contradictory to the narrative that Tim Pool just said.
Yes.
The prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, in Ukraine had about a dozen plus, according to Matt Taibbi, open investigations into the corruption of Mykola Zlochevsky. It is now...
So I actually looked this up. So Matt Taibbi, I didn't know, I couldn't find the one where he said a dozen, but I did find a tweet from Matt Taibbi. So I don't know if Tim's referring to a different tweet. The only tweet I could find was Matt Taibbi saying that there were dormant. He said the cases against Burisma and Shokin's office were not closed, but they were dormant.
Okay.
And he was making a distinction. So, but he didn't cite anything, so I don't know where that information comes from.
Yeah, I don't know what these cases were about. Like they're operating under Western style thinking that these are not corrupt institutions. I have no, like if it's a corrupt institution, all bets are off, right? He opens investigations regularly to get a bribe and then he lets them dormant in case the bribe money stops, right?
Well, this is how corrupt Shokin's office was, okay? And I told you this before the stream, and I should say it on stream, which is that one of the big cases that they were trying to get closed at the time, though this happened kind of in early on the stage, not around this time period, was that the United Kingdom had froze $23 million in the president of Burisma's account, had froze it and was basically trying to get it back because they believed that he had basically stolen it from, you know, some improper sources that was like Western foreign aid or something. And in order for them to maintain the freeze on this account, they needed evidence and information from Ukraine's Attorney General's office. And so they had been requesting a bunch of information from Ukraine to basically maintain the freeze on President Burisma's account. And for months, Ukraine was completely unwilling to help UK, completely unwilling to help them go after Burisma. Okay. And Shokin is like the lead, he's not in charge of the office, but he's like the lead deputy attorney general at the time that this is going on. Okay. But there's some guy, eventually there's some lawyer in the attorney general's office who isn't corrupt, who does think they should go after Burisma. And so he basically tells his boss to F off. He's going to help the UK do this. And so he actually gives the UK the information that they want. But then the UK still loses the case and they have to unfreeze all the money in the president of Burisma's account and give him the money back. And the one guy who was not corrupt in the Ukrainian office finds out that the reason the courts in the UK unfroze the money was because a different lawyer in the UK office, one of his superiors, actually sent counter evidence defending the president of Burisma to the UK courts. And the UK courts use that information to basically unfreeze the account money. So you have like dueling people in the attorney general's office fighting over whether they should be going after Burisma or not. Like the whole thing's a massive like cluster F.
Well, you know that guy took a bribe. The guy who sent the confirmatory information that got the money unfroze.
Obviously it would seem like something shady was going on there. So
yeah.
Known that Hunter Biden was asked to make a call to D.C. to help solve this problem, for which a few days later, Joe Biden flew to Ukraine and without the authority to do so, because the vice president does not have authority to withhold congressionally approved loan guarantees, threatened the president that he would withhold it unless they fired the prosecutor, because after the fact they say this, we put in someone good.
Okay, so the way he described this is not accurate. Well, first of all, we're kind of working backwards, as we already talked about. He's kind of making it sound like Joe Biden just decided to do this on a whim, and that is not accurate. This was the official Obama administration's policy, was to withhold the loan guarantee until Shokin was replaced, and they put someone else in charge. And when you understand that's a loan guarantee for $1 billion, and America doesn't want to pay the $1 billion, they want to make sure Ukraine can pay back the $1 million. It sort of makes sense why they want to make sure that they have a not corrupt attorney general's office.
Right. Yeah. They don't want the money for paying back the loan to end up in some oligarch's bank account and slip off to Russia.
Yeah, because what actually happened was, and the thing that I didn't realize until doing research for this, was that part of the reason that we were doing these loan guarantees is that in 2014, when Yanukovych fled to Russia, basically him and a bunch of his allies took all of Ukraine's money
and
embezzled it away. It was just like gone. Like billions of dollars to Ukraine were just lost in 2014 when Yanukovych fled.
Wow, because he had the account information.
Yeah, him and a bunch of his allies, they all fled. And that's part of why the UK was going after the President Burisma, because they thought he was in league with Yanukovych embezzling that money, and they thought that $23 million was some of the embezzled money, essentially.
Wow.
And I've found zero evidence that the Obama administration trying to withhold the loan guarantee was illegal at all. I've found nothing to ever confirm that whatsoever. But he made this claim. Let me just go back for 1 second.
The vice president does not have authority. Hunter Biden was asked to make a call to D.C. to help solve this problem, for which a few days later, Joe Biden flew to Ukraine and without the authority to do so.
Okay. He says Hunter Biden was told to solve this problem, referring to Shokin, to solve this problem. Hunter Biden says he's going to call D.C. A few days later, Joe Biden flies to D.C., blah, 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 that happens. Devin Archer doesn't say that. And we'll talk about it because he brings up an article. Devin Archer does not say that. He says he does not know what the phone call was about. And he doesn't know that whether they called Joe Biden or not. Okay.
Right.
So, because the vice president does not have authority to withhold congressionally approved loan guarantees, threatened the president that he would withhold it unless they fired the prosecutor, because after the fact they say this, we put in someone good. Now, the problem with this story is...
How do you know intention?
Let's get there. Mykola Zlochevsky, the founder of Burisma, had fled the country during these investigations. We know that Hunter Biden was asked specifically to call D.C. to deal with the prosecutor investigating Burisma.
That is not true.
Right.
That is 100% not true.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the quote.
Right.
After Joe Biden went and got the prosecutor fired, they put in someone who he said was solid. And then the corrupt Zlochevsky returns to Ukraine. When Donald Trump began looking back into what this was about, Zlochevsky flees the country again. So here we have evidence for which you've never heard.
So, and also, by the way, when Shokin is in the Attorney General, for the entire year of 2015, there's no evidence at all that there's any movement or any investigation of Burisma at any point. The only time that we know whatsoever that there was any investigation to Burisma from Shokin was in February of 2016, after Joe Biden publicly goes to Ukraine and publicly tells the president of Ukraine to fire Shokin.
Right.
That's the only time after that is when Shokin actually moves on Burisma.
Right. He's trying to save his job.
Well, he's either A, trying to save his job, or B, he's pissed off that he knows that Joe Biden's son is on the board of Burisma.
So he legitimately is going after them for corruption.
So maybe he's just like, listen, Joe Biden, I mean, we don't know this obviously, but I'm saying Joe Biden flies to Ukraine. He tells the president to fire Shokin. Shokin's like, oh, you're going to try to get me fired? Well, let me go after Burisma because your son's on the board. Right.
Right. Yeah.
But the fact remains, Joe Biden was engaging in private business dealings. If you want to argue it's fine he does because they all influence peddle, make arguments about Ivanka Trump.
Not my argument. It's not my argument.
But I'm not saying you, I'm the rhetorical you.
Sure.
That Ivanka was doing trade deals or copyright stuff with China, fine. But for the vice president to fly out a few days after Hunter Biden contacts D.C. with a problem of a quote unquote prosecutor investigating, or a prosecutor quote unquote investigating Burisma, and he then threatens a quid pro quo against the country, which he has no authority to do. And then when Donald Trump says, "What's this all about?" they say Trump's the one who did something wrong.
Okay. So 2 things here. I hear what you're saying. I think you're making a conclusion.
Well, okay, wait. So first of all, as I said, there's no evidence that that happened. That's not what Devin Archer said in his testimony. He did not say that, number one. Number two, the problem isn't Donald Trump saying, I want to investigate the firing of, what was the rationale for the firing of Shokin and all the stuff with the loan guarantee. The problem was he was withholding foreign aid money to try to pressure a foreign country into announcing that they were going to investigate Burisma as a pretext that he could use this to attack Joe Biden. Why did Donald Trump not simply go to the Attorney General's office, whether you think it was corrupt or not for him to do this, and say, I want you to investigate whether Joe Biden pressured this guy to be fired for corrupt reasons or not? Why is he doing it in this weird, circuitous way through Ukraine?
Yeah, he wants the announcement of the investigation.
Yes, exactly. Because if he tells the Attorney General to do it, they're not going to make a big grand announcement that they're investigating it. They're just going to investigate it. And if they find out,
could lead to nothing.
Right. And if they find out, well, no, actually it was the official Obama policy and here's all the rationale they gave for it, and we don't have any evidence that there was anything untoward, then no one knows about it and it doesn't really help Donald Trump.
Right.
Where
that even makes sense
not...
according to why Shokin would be so pissed off. Imagine if Zelensky is going to go to Ukrainian TV and say, this guy's corrupt, we're announcing an investigation.
Yeah,
all of a sudden it's going to be hard to get your next job, right?
Well, actually, here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. Do you know how Trump got the idea to do this in the first place?
Oh, let's hear it.
Shokin himself contacted Rudy Giuliani.
No way.
It suggested it. Yes.
For who?
Shokin himself contacted Rudy Giuliani. He'd heard. So Rudy Giuliani went to Ukraine trying to dig up dirt for Biden.
Yes.
And Shokin found out about this.
Election.
Yeah. And so Shokin found out about this and he contacted Rudy and he said, listen, I got a story for you. And he tells him and he gives him, Rudy Giuliani, this whole narrative that he was fired by Biden in order to protect Burisma. Shokin's the one that put the whole idea in Rudy Giuliani's mind in the first place.
I thought you were talking about the idea to announce that he was corrupt.
No. The idea that what Biden was doing.
This whole
was
narrative
corrupt.
that Tim is talking about came from Shokin.
Yeah. The whole narrative that Biden did this to protect Burisma was literally created by Shokin, and Shokin gave that narrative to Rudy Giuliani, who then gave it to Trump.
Wow.
Evidence you can tell what's in Joe Biden's mind there, but if you're talking about throwing Hunter Biden to the wolves of the Justice Department, I have no issue with that. My problem here, Tim, is I think it's about proportionality, right? It's like, I think directionally, if you look at the integrity of the State Department and the processes under Joe Biden, I think directionally, of course, you can find things that you can criticize.
If you've watched this whole thing, she says directionally a lot, and it triggers a lot of people, and I understand why, because she keeps kind of diverting away from specific points and just saying, well, I think I'm right directionally, even if I'm not right about the specific.
Which is meaningless. That's why people are so triggered about it. It's like, what do you mean by directionally?
Right.
It's like everyone's a corrupt fraud, but directionally, everything's fine.
And what she means by that, she feels like generally that she's correct.
Right.
Which in this case, I think she is more correct. She just doesn't know why she's correct or really have the evidence to back it up.
She doesn't know she doesn't have enough information to know if she's correct.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. She's not correct. She's correct by happenstance.
Right. Yeah. Right. Accidentally.
Right. Accidentally. Yes.
But I think it is shown infinitely more integrity than you can find under the Trump administration.
I mean, an argument if we're talking about specifically about the impeachment, then feel free to say everything you want to say. You want to turn the monitor over? Look, you can deny.
I just want to say this is a very slope side because you can put up any clip and demand.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
to it, and there's not.
Hunter Biden called D.C. to get Ukraine prosecutor fired for Burisma, his ex-business
partner.
According
to the Free Beacon,
and the Free Beacon is NewsGuard certified 80%.
Okay.
Is NewsGuard is NewsGuard?
Well, I think they got the 20% on this story then.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually looked up this story.
Uh-huh.
The Hunter Biden. I closed the tab, unfortunately. Free Beacon. Here's my Shokin. This article is actually really awful.
Right.
So I'm not familiar with Free Beacon whatsoever.
Are you so in the Archer? What's his name?
Devin Archer.
Devin Archer. That's it.
Right.
He says that he doesn't necessarily know why Hunter was talking to Biden on various phone calls. They just talk like every day and stuff.
Yes. So the article from the Free Beacon, if you read it, it says the headline, Hunter Biden called DC to get Ukraine prosecutor fired for Burisma. His ex-partner reportedly testifies.
Right.
And then if you scroll down to the first two paragraphs, it says Hunter Biden allegedly called DC in 2015 to get the Ukrainian prosecutor investigating his Ukrainian employee fired. His former business associate, Devin Archer, reportedly, a lot of reportedly's here, testified Monday. Archer sat on the board of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma Holdings with Biden levied the allegations during his Monday testimony before the House Oversight Committee, Fox News reported.
Okay.
Okay. And there's a link. So they're just citing Fox News. You click the link. Fox News put out this article. This article was put out the day before or a couple days before the Devin Archer testimony was made public.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. And it says the Fox News article, which by the way, it's kind of funny because, he says Free Beacon has a high rating of 80. I believe Fox News has like a low rating of like 50 something.
So that's why he didn't go to Fox News with this.
Well, I don't think, I don't know. He probably just didn't read the article. I probably just looked at the headline. But so the Fox News article says Devin Archer testified Monday that Hunter Biden and top executives of Burisma Holding called DC in 2015 to ask the Obama administration to help fire the Ukrainian prosecutor investigating the firm. A source familiar with his testimony told Fox News. Okay. So you always have to be careful when it says a source familiar, makes a claim. So now that we actually have the testimony, we know that that is not true, that this story is completely false. And it's actually incredibly irresponsible for both Fox News and the Free Beacon to leave this story up because it is just not true.
Right, because the testimony dropped and it's totally contradictory to this.
Well, this is where I think is what happened. So when Devin Archer is asked the question first, he's sort of led to say that he thinks he called Joe Biden. And then when they say, does he call Joe Biden? And he says, oh, no. He just said he was calling DC. And he says, and they ask him clarify again, do you know whether Hunter called his father? And he says, no. All I know is that they said they called DC, number one. And then number two, and this is where I don't know where Fox News is getting this because it's completely untrue. When he specifically asked, Devin Archer specifically asked, is this about Shokin? He says he is not aware whatsoever that any of these phone calls were about Shokin. That is a complete fabrication for Fox News to print this. Whoever was familiar with this story just made this up.
This is the same testimony where he's saying that the narrative he got with Shokin was that he was under control.
Yes.
That Burisma had him in his pocket, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And let me.
So why would you be trying to get someone fired that you already have a relationship with?
It doesn't make sense, does it?
It doesn't. Not at all. I'm just trying to dig down to the actual situation here.
Right.
Look, I've seen a bunch of mob movies. I know how this works. Like, if you've got one guy that's on your team that's corrupt, I mean, you want to make sure, like, you don't want to have to bribe someone new. You want to keep that guy involved.
Right, because, so in the testimony, they literally say, without having to read the whole thing to you, they literally say, the question is, and the question is asked from a Republican senator, saying, 5 days later, Vice President Biden has a trip to Ukraine, and he makes a statement. It's not enough to set up a new anti-corruption bureau and establish a special prosecuting fighting corruption. The office of the general prosecutor desperately needs reform. I know you've talked about these different pressures, but when Vice President Biden comes on December 9th, 2015, he talks about the specific pressure of the office of the general prosecutor. And so based on that, is it your testimony here that Hunter Biden, Victor Shokin, that Hunter Biden and Vadim never discussed the investigation by Shokin into Burisma? Okay. So I specifically asked him, is it your understanding that they never discussed the investigation into Burisma? Okay.
Right.
And then he says, Archer's response is I was spun a narrative that Shokin was good for Burisma.
Yes.
That's his answer to the question. Okay. And then he says, no, I'm not aware of whether that conversation happened or not. It didn't happen in front of me. I have no knowledge of it. Okay.
Yep.
So this article, this Free Beacon article, and this narrative that Fox News has put out that, Devin Archer testified that, Hunter Biden was told that they got to go fix Shokin, and then Hunter Biden goes and he calls his father. That's a complete fabrication. None of that actually happened, or at least there's no evidence that it happened. It could happen, I guess, theoretically, but there's no evidence that it happened, and Devin Archer 100% did not testify that it happened.
I got to wrap up, so.
I know. We're almost done.
NewsGuard not good enough for you?
I don't know what NewsGuard is. I typically get my news from New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times.
So, right. And if if Devin Archer has testified that this is the case, you can say they're lying, the media's fake news. I'll take that. Fine, sure, whatever. But at a certain point,
how many times do I have to say if Hunter Biden effed up?
no, it's Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It's Joe Biden. And when Donald Trump
have a headline
actually
here, Hunter Biden made
called
a call.
DC to Ukraine, and
How
then
do you
4 days
know
later, Joe Biden flew to
acted?
Ukraine to get the prosecutor fired. If you're going to be that obtuse, you're not here in good faith.
No, I just
4 days after Hunter calls and says the prosecutor's shaking us down, Joe Biden goes and threatens to withhold illegally, I might add, congressionally approved loan guarantees.
It just looks so bad that she doesn't know the narrative at all.
Oh yeah, well, it looks so bad. She doesn't know the narrative at all. You're right. And then also because it allows Tim to just keep repeating this claim that is not true, even remotely true at all.
Yeah. You got to know both narratives. You got to know the narrative. Both parties are trying to spin a narrative here.
Right.
And when we have a president, you can call Donald Trump all the names in the book. You can call him disgusting, lewd, lascivious, and corrupt. But if he calls and says, what's going on with this Joe Biden thing? And they say, quick, impeach Donald Trump. I'm sorry. I don't think Trump is the corrupt one in that story.
I think it's just conspiracy thinking, man.
It's a conspiracy that Hunter Biden called DC to get the prosecutor fired, and then Joe Biden flew to Ukraine to get the prosecutor fired. Those are facts.
Those are facts. Temperature.
Right,
We've had a great conversation.
Those are facts.
Almost 2 hours.
None of those are facts, but okay. That's fine.
Let's turn down the temperature here. I hear what you're saying. I will look into this, and I will happily call into your show or do whatever you want to do. If you want to have another conversation about this when I've looked into what you're alleging more, I promise I will look into.
I'm not alleging anything. I'm.
It's just this is just so bad.
He's not alleging anything. I mean, but okay.
I'm citing news for you. And I showed you a video.
I'm going to finish what I'm saying. What I think a problem with your show.
This is painful, Sitch, because there's
really
there's
painful?
no one to root for here. This
I
is
know.
like
I know. It's bad.
I just why?
Is, and I think this is yeah, Tim, what I was hoping we could talk about today is how you moved from Occupy Wall Street, which one of my critiques of Occupy Wall Street is there was a lot of, I don't want to.
Okay, so
Yeah, moving on. Look,
Right,
I don't
yeah,
know
it's
anything
like-
about
right.
this situation.
yeah,
You're a
right, so-
conspiracy theorist.
yes,
Like that's what makes it look so bad.
yes.
To call somebody a conspiracy theorist when you don't even know the details of the situation.
Right.
That's like so bold.
That's a great point. Yeah, you can't say you're a conspiracy theorist if you don't even understand what like the narrative or the story or the facts
Yeah.
that they're calling from, because you don't even know.
Yeah.
And if she
yeah.
would have just read the article, just read literally the first 2 lines of the article, and it says, this is a source claims this happened, right? Like, this is what you would do if you're in a situation and you're unfamiliar. You say, well, read me the beginning of that article. And it says a source claims it. You say, a source claimed it.
Look,
Fox News reported it. Click the Fox News link. You go to Fox News. Fox News says, a source familiar claims this. And you say, was that true, Tim? You're trusting an anonymous source? What did the actual Devin Archer testimony say? It's publicly available. And you look up the Devin Archer testimony and you find out that's not what it says. That person, for the Fox News person, just made it up.
It still comes off as nitpicky to
If you're not like,
if you don't know the broad strokes of the narrative, I think that's the chief problem.
No,
you
I
got to
agree with
break
you
it down
completely.
for people.
I agree with you
Otherwise, it
completely,
comes
yes.
off completely nitpicky.
I agree with you completely. Right. But I'm just saying, if you're in that situation and you don't know what they're talking about, you can look through it and see what they're talking about. Like, at least try to see what you're talking about. And if she did, all the tools were there for her to actually in real time debunk this claim.
Right.
To just say, well, the source made this claim. Let's go look at the source. The source exists. I mean, they talked for 3.5 hours. So it's not like they didn't have time to do this. They bring up the Devon Archer testimony. Tim has people work for him, says, look in the Devon Archer testimony for the part you're talking about. And lo and behold, you would discover, oh, wait, he never actually said this was about Shokin. He explicitly said it wasn't about Shokin. And he explicitly said that that he didn't think that they were calling Joe Biden. All he knew was that they were calling DC.
Right. I don't.
And so, I mean, so you've caught Fox News and Free Beacon reporting on Fox News saying something that's just deliberately not true. And it's kind of completely irresponsible that Fox News still has that story available and hasn't corrected it.
Yeah. Still doesn't really drill down on the actual narrative of the situation here.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. But so, yeah, the rest of the conversation, it's a very frustrating conversation to listen to.
Well, if you know
that
anything
pattern,
about the Ukraine situation or impeachment, it is very frustrating to listen to. If you don't know anything about that stuff, or if you do know a lot, but you only know it from Tim's perspective, then it's not frustrating to listen to at all. He's completely destroying her with facts and logic.
Even then, it's still frustrating because you're just perceiving it like he's throwing all these facts and Brianna's just running away and dodging all this facts, right? That's how you perceive it if you believe what Tim was saying. But then the rest of the conversation is not the right, but like a lot of chunks of the conversation are about Brianna kind of going through the classic accusing Tim Pool of being biased in favor of the right, not really being able to make a coherent argument about that, and then changing the subject. Like it's just the same thing again and again and again and again.
Right.
They kind of go deeper into the Donald Trump Jr. accusations, and it's very silly and
the accusatory tone, your show. This is the thing. She accuses him of his show being divisive. It's like, you're holding a Majority Report mug, okay?
Yeah.
Like you really cannot make that claim with a Majority Report mug in your hand.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a fantastic point. And they actually talk about that earlier or later. I don't know. Some point in this, they talk about the Sam Cedar thing, and in her defense, you can criticize Tim for being divisive or whatever. You can't criticize Tim in one breath and then praise Sam in the other breath. Sam is very divisive, incredibly biased in his reporting, insanely biased in his reporting, especially right after the whole Jesse Singal situation, which was like ludicrous. So, and it's fine if Brianna wants to like Sam Cedar, that's fine, but you can't hold them up as some kind of standard while criticizing Tim.
Yeah. All right. We have a couple of super chats to read.
Yeah, let me read some super chats and then we'll read the rest on Tuesday.
And I feel like we should do a stream just on the Ukraine stuff because I hear a lot of people talking about it. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it very clearly, where I think other people who don't read every single piece of information that's out there can really understand what's going on.
Yeah,
there's two audiences. There's the audience of the people who know every single detail of the situation, and then there's the audience that
everyone else, the normies, the normal people.
Yeah, and I don't think the normies can. It's quickly diverging from the normies even being able to understand what the hell we're talking about here.
Well, the problem is the Ukraine situation is so stupidly complicated. There's so many people involved. There's so many moving pieces and parts to involve that you're right. Like you have to sit down and literally just write out everything and then edit it down because there's so much information that on one hand is important, but on the other hand probably just confuses people.
Yeah,
all the background information.
This is why I kind of flipped out on you on Shokin, because the whole thing kind of hinges on whether or not Shokin is a Western style prosecutor facing a corrupt system, who is, the guy who's doing the right thing, me against the world, or if Shokin is a corrupt mob boss who is willing to throw anyone under the bus so he can line his pockets.
Right.
So
all evidence points to him being corrupt.
Yeah. So once you know that, everything starts clicking into place.
Well, yes and no, because just because because even if Shokin is highly corrupt and say Shokin is super corrupt and he's going to Burisma and he is trying to shake Burisma down for a bribe. And then so Burisma says, listen, Hunter Biden, Shokin is trying to shake us down for a bribe. Can you call your dad to get him off our back? And if Hunter Biden does that, that still puts Joe Biden in the wrong, even though Shokin is corrupt and wrong. That would still mean that Joe Biden did was wrong. So just Shokin being corrupt alone is not enough to sort of assuage the entire situation or to prove Joe Biden's innocence, I should say.
Right.
Though I do agree it's an important factor because Tim and a lot of people try to make it seem like Shokin was just like completely. It's funny. Like whenever I hear people talk about this, they're like, Ukraine is a cesspool of corruption. But then there's Shokin. He was the one angel. He was the one non-corrupt person who was actually going after Burisma. And you're like, okay, whatever.
Look, our narrative works with Shokin being not corrupt or corrupt.
Yes, I understand.
Their narrative only works if Shokin is not corrupt.
Yes.
That's why it's important.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Twitter Sucks for $20 says, I love the notion that quote, regulations prevent criminals from owning guns, so we need new regulations. No, enforce the current regulations. The Second Amendment does not apply to criminals. Stop taking rights away. I agree. That was about the New Mexico thing.
Gun control. Thanks.
Slate King for $20 says, everything Brianna says should be preceded by, quote, as a Majority Report fan, I believe. And followed by, quote, and that is why I get my news from Sam Sater. Yeah, it's not good.
That's pretty devastating.
Pretty devastating. Thea Wolfie for $20 says, Sitch and Adam are incredibly good faith, honest, and willing to engage in arguments with many people. I've been watching them, and they've become my favorite enlightened centrist. Stitch and Saddam, on the other hand. There you go. Well, thank you, Thea Wolfie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's a reference, obviously, to the recorded video we did on the Brianna Wu situation.
Yes.
So now the meme is whenever anyone gets our name wrong, that's when we're the evil right-wing Republicans.
Oh, I see. So okay, so they're not really talking about Sitch and Adam. They're talking about our alternate evil twins that have evil twin universe mustaches and beards. Yeah.
Yes, we did a couple recorded videos on the channel too, so check them out if you missed them. Yeah.
Magnus the Red for $50. Thank you, Magnus. Says, another show this week. Thanks, boys, for the extra doses. Take my money. What are your top 3 books for enlightened centrism? Free will for the win.
Well, mine would be The Righteous Mind, obviously.
Yep.
Why Nations Fail, and The Dictator's Handbook.
I agree. Boom. Nail it. And also Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. You can throw them in. This is my 4th. RBGH fan for $20 says, I hugely disagree with your geopolitics and MMT relations to war, but thoroughly enjoy your discussion on difficult topics in search of the truth. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, look, we're going to make an effort to try to persuade you guys by really digging into what facts that we know are true in this situation. Right, Sitch? I think that's a good assessment of what we're trying to do.
We're going to try. I mean,
yeah. So, if you're unconvinced, if we're not providing information that's swaying you, or you think you have a piece of information that we're missing, let us know so we can address it.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, honestly, if you ask me, you're saying like, Sitch, what would be best for you? Is Joe Biden innocent or corrupt here? What would be best for me probably would be to find out like that there's actually a recording of Hunter Biden that comes out where he talks to his dad and specifically tells him to fire Shokin. Because then I get to say, oh, well, there's your evidence. I get to completely change my position. Look, see, I'm not bound by tribalism whatsoever. Look how enlightened centrist I am.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes. So
I don't think that evidence exists because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And also, look, we have a huge piece of information here. Hunter Biden's business partners literally saying that Shokin worked for them, that Shokin was under control.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know. Obviously, you look for evidence that you can. Maybe he's lying, whatever, and it's a pretty big piece of evidence. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all in favor if they want to try to drag in Hunter to testify what happened in that December phone call. I mean, I doubt they could drag in the President Burisma, but, they could. That'd be nice just to see, get them on record making some claim about what exactly was going on. I think it's silly. They tried to get Hunter to get the President Burisma's visa back, and he couldn't even accomplish that. So it's hard for me to imagine that he couldn't do that thing, but he could somehow get his father to fire the attorney general in Ukraine. Doesn't
Yeah,
make
it
sense to me.
doesn't make a lot of sense. So okay,
But anyway.
we'll do the rest of the super chats on Tuesday, and we'll go ahead and leave it there.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.